Call an ambulance, quick, hurry. My husband, Caleb, who always made me angry, suddenly collapsed on the floor, sweating heavily. The paramedics came right away. They checked Caleb quickly and put him on a stretcher. Then they turned to me and asked, "You're his wife, right? Can you come with us to the hospital?" Caleb looked at me with desperate eyes as they carried him away. I stared back at him. "No, I won't," I said, without hesitation. "What?" Caleb's voice sounded like he couldn't believe it. "Are you leaving me here?" "So?" I replied. "I'm not coming." "What do you mean?" "Just take care of the rest," I said, turning away. "Wait, Lydia, wait," Caleb called out. I pulled something from my pocket that I'd been carrying for days. The moment Caleb saw it, his face went even whiter. "How dare you treat me like a servant all these years? This is my revenge. I will never forgive you." Let me explain a bit about myself. My name is Lydia. I'm 36 years old and a housewife. I live in a rented apartment with my husband, Caleb. I met Caleb through a coworker when I used to work full-time. My coworker liked to invite me to parties, but I'm more of an introvert who prefers watching movies or cooking alone. I didn't like big groups and often turned down the invites. One time, my coworker invited me to a barbecue. I said no at first, but he insisted, so I went. The party had a lot of people, and one of them was Caleb, who later became my husband. I was sitting by myself, having a drink, when my coworker brought Caleb over. He thought Caleb and I might get along because we had similar interests. At first, I was surprised, but Caleb was friendly and funny. He was tan and seemed like the outdoorsy type. As we talked, I found we had more in common than I thought. We started talking more, and it clicked right away. We exchanged phone numbers and made plans to meet again. We went on dates and hung out a lot. Eventually, Caleb proposed, and we got married. Before we got married, Caleb was always kind to me, even though he was more outgoing and liked to be outside. After marriage, things didn't change much at first, but over the years, some things started to bother me. I quit my job to become a housewife because Caleb wanted me to, but he often made sarcastic comments about it. For example, one time when I wasn't feeling well and dinner was late. "I'm home, Lydia, why isn't dinner ready?" "Sorry, I was sick and had to rest. Can you take a bath first?" "You're a housewife, you should at least have dinner ready," Caleb said, never showing any concern for my health. It made me feel really sad. Another time, I mentioned a reunion in my hometown. "Caleb, there's a reunion coming up. Can I go once I finish my chores?" "Do whatever you want. Being a stay-at-home wife is great. You know, I envy you, Lydia. You get to spend your husband's money. He's usually nice, carrying my purse and bringing me flowers after work, but sometimes, he's rude." I even suggested getting a part-time job, thinking maybe Caleb wanted me to work, but he insisted I stay at home, so I remained a full-time housewife. One day, I got an unexpected call from one of Caleb's relatives. I picked up the phone, feeling uneasy. The relative was panicking on the other end of the line. "Caleb's mother has collapsed." I froze, shocked by the news. The relative explained that she had gone to visit my mother-in-law earlier and found her lying in the yard. She called an ambulance, which took my mother-in-law to the hospital. I quickly rushed to get ready and ran out of the house. When I arrived at the hospital, they told me that my mother-in-law's condition was still unstable. As we were talking, Caleb arrived, out of breath. We went to the hospital room to see my mother-in-law, who was lying in bed, hooked up to various tubes. It was hard to watch. "Mom," Caleb called, but she didn't respond. Caleb stayed at the hospital all day, and I went home to get some things for our stay. Over time, my mother-in-law started recovering and was able to sit up on her own, but she still needed help with most things. "I'm glad she can sit up now. I hope she'll be able to walk again with physical therapy," I said to Caleb. When my mother-in-law's discharge date was approaching, I told Caleb, we should start preparing for her to come home. Then, Caleb said something that confused me. "Oh, by the way, we're leaving this house next week. You better start packing." I was confused. Caleb seemed frustrated with me, like he didn't like my reaction. "We don't need this house. We're moving in with my mom." "Wait, does that mean we're going to live with my mother-in-law after she leaves the hospital?" I never heard anything about that. "What? Did you decide to move in without talking to me? Have you already canceled the lease for this place?" When I said that, Caleb got even more irritated. "Of course, I canceled the lease. It's the right thing for us as a family, to live together and help my mom. Don't tell me you don't want to live with her. I'm the one who works, so I won't take any complaints." He said this and walked away with a firm step. I couldn't believe Caleb was being so strict about this. He had cancelled the lease without even discussing it with me. Now, I had no choice but to move. I knew he was worried about his mom, but this was too much. I sighed deeply. A few days later, I found myself living with my mother-in-law. I had never cared for anyone before, so everything was new to me. I spent most of my days feeding, bathing, and helping her use the bathroom. She didn't want my help and hardly spoke to me. When I tried to talk to her, she would hide in bed and say she was in pain. Before she got sick, my relationship with her wasn't bad. We'd sometimes share snacks from the department store. Maybe she was too weak to care for anyone else. Caleb, on the other hand, rarely came home after work. He would go out for drinks and come back in the morning. If he stayed home, he'd find some excuse to leave, and when he was home, he'd just play video games in his room. One day, I decided to talk to him while he was gaming. "I know you're busy with work and drinking with your colleagues, but can't you help me take care of your mom when you're home, or at least help with the housework?" He didn't even look up from his game. "Why are you being so naive? Housework and caregiving are your job. I'm tired from working all day." "Well, I'm almost out of coffee. Can you make me some? And clean this room, okay? Also, take these clothes to the dry cleaner. I need them by Wednesday." Caleb gave orders and threw his clothes at me. This time, I couldn't hold back and snapped. "That's enough. I've been doing everything, housework and taking care of your mom, for the past month without a break. Why can't you help a little?" Caleb slammed his game controller onto the desk, stood up, and said angrily, "How dare you talk to me like that? Who do you think is providing for you? If you have a problem, then get out, take your stuff and leave." I hesitated, then said, "I feel bad for my mom. She's going to be left all alone with no one to care for her." I couldn't say anything else. It was true that I didn't have much money saved, and I couldn't leave my mother-in-law, who couldn't do anything for herself. I held back my feelings, picked up his clothes, and left the room. After 6 months of this difficult life, my mother-in-law passed away suddenly. One morning, I went to check on her as usual, but she wasn't breathing. I called an ambulance, but it was too late. Caleb was crying, saying, "I don't know why." But I couldn't cry. I felt cold seeing Caleb cry so easily. I thought, "You didn't do anything to help her." And when I realized I didn't have to care for her anymore, I felt a strange sense of relief. I felt guilty for feeling that way. Time passed quickly. After the wake and funeral, I suddenly realized 2 weeks had passed since my mother-in-law's death. It was time to sort through her things. After Caleb left for work, I started cleaning her room. I packed her favorite clothes and accessories into boxes. It didn't take long since there wasn't much. Then, I opened a cabinet next to her bed. There wasn't much inside, but on the bottom shelf was a large can. I remembered it. It was a can of assorted sweets I had given her when she was still healthy. I wondered why the can was there. I opened it, and inside, I found a letter. It was addressed to me, starting with "Dear Lydia." I quickly opened the envelope and found a message written in trembling handwriting. "Lydia, I'm sorry for making you take care of me. I was ashamed of forcing you to work for me every day. I was also ashamed of my son, Caleb. I know how badly he treated you. Lydia, you should leave him and live your life the way you want." My mother-in-law knew everything. She knew how selfish her son was and how it was hurting me. At the end of the letter, she wrote, "I'm glad I could spend the last days of my life with you, Lydia. Thank you." That was when I cried for the first time since she passed away. It felt like everything I had been holding in finally came out. I cried until I had no more tears left, and then I made up my mind. I was going to divorce my husband. 10 days later, after finding the letter, my husband was still treating me like a servant. "Lydia, I'm missing a sock. Where is it? And take my car to the car wash today. You've got nothing else to do, right?" He was going golfing with his colleagues today. I couldn't believe it. Today was our wedding anniversary, and he had completely forgotten. "I don't even care about it anymore. What will you do while I'm golfing? You can't just sit around. You have to make dinner, clean my room, and clean the bathroom. You have a lot to do." His arrogance left me speechless. "Hey, you hear me? Bring me my sock and a jacket. Hurry up or I'll be late." At that moment, Caleb suddenly collapsed on the floor, clutching his stomach. He was sweating in pain. He told me to call an ambulance, sounding like he was trying to make it as dramatic as possible. I froze. shocked by what was happening, and he yelled, "Hurry up, you're useless, call an ambulance." When Caleb yelled at me, I felt strangely calm. I called 911, and within minutes, an ambulance arrived with paramedics. The paramedics quickly checked Caleb's condition and placed him on a stretcher. As they moved him, one of them asked, "You're his wife, right? Will you come with us to the hospital?" Caleb looked at me with pleading eyes, but I looked right back at him and said firmly, "No, I will not." "What?" Caleb sounded shocked, as if he couldn't believe what I was saying. "This man is a stranger. I'm not coming, please take care of the rest." Then, I pulled out something from my pocket, the divorce papers I had been carrying for days. They were the ones I had been forced to sign after a fight with Caleb. He had always threatened me with them if I didn't obey him. Caleb tried to grab the papers, but the pain was too much for him to move. He just had to lie back on the stretcher. "Excuse me, but please leave now." I said this, and the paramedics finally took Caleb away in the ambulance. He must have looked like the pitiful husband whose wife had divorced him. He deserved to feel embarrassed. I watched the ambulance drive off and then left the house. It took some time, but the divorce papers were accepted, and everything was finalized. While Caleb was in the hospital for a week, I packed up my things and sent them to my parents' house. Then one day, I ran into Caleb at the grocery store. "Lydia, please don't do this. You love me, don't you? Please don't leave me. I know I've made mistakes. I got carried away because you always listened to me." The arrogance he used to have was gone, and he looked completely pathetic. "What are you talking about? The divorce is already final. It's too late for you to act like this. Live your life however you want." He couldn't believe that I was actually going through with the divorce. He looked shocked, his hands shaking, and his face turning pale. Well, that's that then, bye. It had been 6 months since Caleb and I got divorced. One day, he showed up at my parents' house. He kept ringing the intercom and calling my name so loudly that I had no choice but to answer. He still wanted me to get back together with him. When I didn't respond, he started telling me about his life now. He couldn't cook because he had always made me do all the housework. Now, he only eats TV dinners or eats out. He had gained 10 pounds since the divorce, with extra fat around his face and stomach. He also didn't know how to do laundry. His shirts were always wrinkled and smelled bad, making him look dirty. "I finally realize how great you were, Lydia. If I don't do something, people at work won't like me," Caleb said, starting to cry with fake tears. Basically, he wanted me to go back to being his servant. "I will never go back to that. Never. If you keep making noise, I'll call the police," I told him coldly. When he realized I meant it, he got scared and left, crying. I was sure he wouldn't bother me again. I hoped so. Caleb seemed to be living a very inconvenient life. Meanwhile, I was living comfortably. I had stayed at my parents' house for a while, but now I had my own small apartment and lived alone. My living standards were lower than when I lived with Caleb, but I liked my life this way. I had time for myself. I thought it would be hard to find a job at my age, but a friend of mine knew someone who had retired, and I was able to take her place. I was so happy being able to spend my time and money on myself, without anyone telling me what to do. From now on, I want to live at my own pace. This is the start of a new chapter in my life.
Henceforth, my brother and his wife declared, "We'll manage the household independently, so find another place to live." My mother, aligning herself with their decision, treated me as an impediment. Do they comprehend who has been footing the bills for the house? I never anticipated such disrespect. In the recesses of my mind, I resolved to take certain actions. I go by the name Carrie, a 30-year-old woman. Currently, I reside in my parents' home after returning from college. Initially, I ventured into the corporate world to forge my path, but the challenges overwhelmed me, prompting my return home. While initially navigating unemployment, I explored work-from-home opportunities. Armed with a scientific background, I embarked on a freelance engineering career. Commencing with modest projects, the income was meager, yet the experience of working independently was profoundly meaningful. In stark contrast to conventional employment, I could generate ample income without excessive social interaction. As my confidence grew, so did my workload and earnings. Within a year, my income rivaled that of a regular corporate employee. However, the predicament lay in my parents' understanding. especially my mother's reluctance to embrace my work-from-home lifestyle. My father grasped my explanation, but my mother, rooted in traditional beliefs, harbored apprehensions about what she couldn't fathom. Despite my earnest attempts to elucidate, my mother persisted with questions like, "How long do you plan on staying home?" and insinuations about the legitimacy of my online work. Despite presenting evidence of client emails and salary statements, my mother remained unconvinced. She suspected it to be some shady business or involvement in a dubious religion, despite the consistent payments and the legitimacy of my job. Despite my detailed explanations, my mother remained steadfast in her skepticism. She continually expressed concerns about the possibility of relying on unemployment benefits, emphasizing their impermanence. Although I had contemplated living independently, my savings were not yet sufficient. Around that time, my father's health took a toll, with deteriorating legs and back necessitating nursing care. Facing an early retirement and sudden income loss, my father assured me that his pension would suffice. However, acknowledging my mother's spending habits, I questioned his ability to manage. His face wore the fatigue of anxiety about the uncertain future. My father had supported me through college and even when I returned home due to mental health challenges. The idea of leaving him alone and continuing to live independently troubled me. My mother, too, grappled with confusion over my father's sudden condition. Contemplating the situation, I felt a sense of responsibility and a desire to give back. Reassuring my father, I pledged to support the family from that point onward. He expressed surprise, doubting my income's adequacy, but I confidently showed him my stable financial situation. Grasping the reality, my father, who had always understood my circumstances, was taken aback by my newfound stability. Encouraged by his understanding, I offered to help with household expenses, medical bills, and other financial obligations. Each month, I transferred a certain amount to my father's bank account, shouldering a significant part of the financial burden. As my mother had been using my father's credit card, I created a new main card and provided her with a supplementary card. My father, mindful of saving money, urged my mother to follow suit. In response, my mother questioned whether I should be asked to leave the house. I pointed out my financial contributions and emphasized that it would be more challenging without my support. Skeptical, my mother remained unconvinced and suspicious of my assistance. It took my father's persuasion to finally gain her agreement, allowing me to continue living with them. Continuing my work and household responsibilities, I found my mother increasingly taking my assistance for granted. Her strictness intensified, with constant remarks about the speed of my chores. "Can't you finish your chores faster?" she would complain. I explained the challenge of multitasking while working, but she dismissed my concerns. The strain on my relationship with her became apparent, and it seemed irreparable. In contrast, my father, understanding my efforts, provided much-needed support. Despite this strained dynamic, we persevered in this manner for a year. After a year, my father's health took a sudden downturn, requiring hospitalization. Visiting him daily, I shared moments of concern and reassurance. Aware of the strain on me, my father expressed gratitude, acknowledging the difficulties in my relationship with my mother. As my father grappled with health issues, the already strained relationship between my mother and me deteriorated further. Despite feeling suffocated at times, I remained committed to supporting my family. Recollections of my mother's past efforts, especially during my student days, kept me steadfast in this commitment. However, a significant shift occurred when my mother welcomed my brother Kevin and his wife Mary. Their unexpected arrival brought an abrupt change to my living situation. My brother explained their decision, stating they would be living in the house from now on to ease the burden on me. I was taken aback, and my mother seemed to avoid eye contact. While my brother and his wife claimed their intention was to support me, a hidden meaning lingered in their words. My mother, expressing gratitude, subtly hinted at my need to contribute more to the household. Despite the surprise, I learned that my brother, a graduate of a prestigious college, had joined a reputable company. The unexpected turn of events left me questioning the true motives behind my brother and his wife's presence in our home. Certainly, he must have been earning a substantial salary, but I too was diligently pursuing my own endeavors. I wondered if they could manage without my contributions. Transitioning into a new life at home with my brother and his wife proved to be more demanding than anticipated. "Wake up, Perry, make breakfast," my brother's wife hollered, banging on my door. Fully awake and already engrossed in my work as a morning person, I explained that I was already up and working. Despite my work commitments, they insisted that I prepare breakfast. "Get on with it and get breakfast ready," she demanded. I reluctantly forced myself to assist, considering our family's usual morning freedom. Typically, we enjoyed meals at our own pace, especially when my mother and brother's wife were present. I presumed it was customary for the wife to prepare breakfast for her husband. However, my sister-in-law insisted on cooperation, and I reluctantly joined them in the kitchen. Despite my efforts, their dissatisfaction was evident. "Is this what you prepared for breakfast?" "This isn't enough," they complained. I had meticulously crafted a breakfast plate featuring soft scrambled eggs, a refreshing lettuce salad, fresh buttered toast, and a succulent sausage, thinking it would be well received. However, it seemed I had missed something. "You don't have to eat it," I retorted. But their surprise was palpable. Their reaction turned confrontational, questioning my attitude and who I thought I was. My brother, often condescending, mocked me, likely influenced by our mother. Despite explaining my work commitments, they dismissed it. "What kind of work is that? Are you crazy?" they exclaimed. Frustrated by their lack of understanding and the impact on my work, I packed my laptop, ignored their protests, and left the house. As I departed, my brother's voice echoed in the background, demanding to know where I was going. Ignoring the question, I proceeded to my father's hospital room. As I hurried into my father's hospital room, his surprised gaze met mine. "Carrie, what's wrong? You seem flustered," he observed. I recounted the recent incident, and my father, wearing a surprised expression, responded, "I didn't know they were. I'm sorry, Carrie. Don't worry about it. You can choose your own way of life." Feeling lost, I expressed concern that my mother might feel more comfortable if my brother Kevin were at home. However, my father reassured me, "You don't need to be in a place where you don't feel comfortable. All I want is for you to live happily. Live your life the way you want to live." Encouraged by my father's words, I decided to leave home. Upon returning that evening, I encountered a tense scene resembling a movie. The serious faces of my mother, brother, and sister-in-law greeted me. My brother accused me of not being at work, forcing him to take the day off. I inwardly questioned the responsibility of easily taking time off work. Their voices escalated, culminating in my brother demanding, "Get out of here. From now on, the three of us will live together. If you don't want to stay, please leave. We don't need an overbearing presence like you to support us." It was a shocking statement, and I replied in surprise, "Why?" Ignoring my protests, my brother and his wife insisted on my departure, declaring that I was no longer needed in the absence of our father. My mother, aligning with their sentiments, regarded me as a hindrance. The frustration intensified as they dismissed my involvement in the family's finances and prioritized their own concerns. Enraged by their insensitivity, I devised a plan. Initially, I transferred the money linked to the credit card my mother used daily to another account under my management. This subtle move aimed to surprise my mother when she could no longer access her credit card. I initiated a money transfer from my father's account, a crucial pillar supporting the family's financial stability. However, I ensured that only my father's medical expenses could be withdrawn from this separate account, unbeknownst to my mother. Consequently, a significant financial burden now rested on my brother and his wife. Though unaware of the intricate details of my brother's income, I was certain that he would feel the weight more than ever. After completing the necessary formalities, I gathered my belongings and declared my departure, saying, "I'm leaving this place." To my surprise, my mother, brother, and sister-in-law, who had been relentlessly harassing me, looked taken aback. Their astonishment revealed that they hadn't anticipated my decisive action, although, from the expressions on their faces, it seemed they were secretly enjoying the moment. As I announced my departure, they belittled me, expressing their relief. "You're finally leaving. We've never dealt with such a troublesome person. You're not coming back, are you?" In response, I asserted, "Of course not. Don't contact me." They smiled as I left the house, but I couldn't help but wonder what they would think after I had left. Embarking on a new life in a tranquil environment, I found solace and the freedom to enjoy my own time. Refreshed and focused, I immersed myself in my work. However, as expected, a call from my brother disrupted the peace. "I told you not to contact me. What's wrong?" I questioned. His voice conveyed surprise and urgency as he inquired about my involvement in the family's financial transactions. Confirming my role, I reminded him that I had mentioned my work several times, but neither he nor our mother had believed me. Expressing confusion, he admitted, "Well, Mom said a lot of things, and I was a little confused." Acknowledging that it wasn't my fault, he revealed a financial predicament. With my absence, they struggled to manage expenses, and my mother's spending had exacerbated the situation. Though sympathetic, I asserted, "I was able to support you in many ways because I was at home. I'm not there anymore, so you have to handle it, Carrie." I found myself in an unexpected situation when my brother contacted me, urgently requesting assistance in transferring money to his bank account. Perplexed, I asked if he was joking, given that he worked for a sizable company. However, to my surprise, my brother confessed that he had been fired from his job due to a significant mistake. His revelation left me speechless, and I realized that he might have returned to our parents' house assuming there was enough money available. Perhaps he relied on the notion of a stable pension following our father's retirement. Wanting to enlighten my brother about my financial contributions to the household, I found amusement in the thought of his astonishment upon learning the truth. His wife and my mother joined the plea for financial aid, claiming they were on the verge of running out of savings. My mother even revealed that my father refused to contribute to household finances any longer. In response, I firmly declared that I had supported them enough, urging them to work hard and support themselves. I severed communication, emphasizing my decision to distance myself from their financial struggles. My father, recognizing the strain in his relationship with my mother, consulted a lawyer and opted for a quieter life in a different place. While I continued to visit my father daily, a friend shared my brother's recent struggles. He had moved into a modest apartment, leading a frugal life. My mother, once a homemaker, faced challenges in her sudden job, while my brother found it difficult to adapt to the opinions of younger colleagues. Despite his wife's efforts, she succumbed to the pressure and departed, leaving my brother and mother to navigate their challenges together. Concerns lingered for my mother, who maintained her habit of overspending, accumulating debts. However, I recognized my limitations in offering assistance. Focused on my own endeavors, I worked diligently in a comfortable living space, gradually accruing more resources. Contemplating new ventures, I aimed to spend quality time with my cheerful father, appreciating every moment with him.
Hi, I'm Sharon and I'm 26 years old. When you reach this age, things start happening around you, just like they did for me. I was about to marry the most amazing man I had ever met. Craig was everything I ever wanted and more. We met on a boating trip. I was with some friends, and he was there for a business meeting in Maryland. I wouldn't call it love at first sight because it wasn't. In fact, during our relationship, we went through many phases before realizing we were meant for each other. My family adores Craig. My mom and dad treat him like their own son, and even the family dog gets more excited to see him than me. I met Craig's mom, Mayla, and his dad, Kevin, a few months after we decided to get married, and we all instantly got along. Mayla is the sweetest lady and reminds me of my mom, while Kevin is laid back and always making jokes. They're not always funny, but we laugh anyway. I was in love with Craig and his family, but this was before I met Natasha, Craig's older sister. One day during a family lunch, Mila mentioned Natasha. "So, your sister's coming to town next week. Are you two going to pick her up at the airport? I think this is a good time to introduce your fiancé to the other woman who helped raise you." Craig laughed while eating some toast. "Pulling my hair, eating half my food, and taking my toys. That's what I call raising me, Mom." The whole table laughed as we enjoyed our meal. After meeting Kevin, I started to see how Craig had picked up his dad's humor. Both of them could crack a good joke every now and then. I thought, well, now I have to wait a week until Craig says something really funny. Hey, it's all part of having a sibling, right? Speaking of which, Sharon, you have one. A sibling, I mean? Oh no, I'm an only child. I did have a few dogs and cats growing up though. Does that count? Of course. My kids scratched and screamed at each other growing up, so I'd say our experiences were the same, Kevin joked, and we all giggled. I felt so at ease around Craig's family, it was almost too comfortable, but thanks to Natasha, things were about to change. Natasha had moved to New York after college. Craig told me his sister could be a bit overprotective, but he said I shouldn't worry. He expected us to get along just as well as I had with the rest of the family. Craig is half Hungarian on his mom's side, but while he hadn't picked up much of the culture Natasha had, the family would try not to speak Hungarian around me because they knew I wouldn't understand. But what they didn't know is that I'm a linguist. While that doesn't mean I can learn languages instantly, it does help. Craig had taught me a few phrases, and I took the initiative to learn more on my own. There are so many websites to help with that these days, so now I can use Hungarian conversationally, though I plan to wait until I was more confident. When are you two getting married? Natasha asked in Hungarian as soon as we were in the car. Seriously, you just met her 5 minutes ago, and she's sitting right next to me. You already forgot her name? Come on, just tell me already. I'm not going to ask her. I could only understand bits and pieces of the conversation. Natasha's accent was different from Mila's, probably because she was raised here. Sharon, Natasha's asking about the wedding. She wants to know the date so she can make arrangements at work. Oh, of course. We don't have a fixed date yet, but it's going to be in March, so 3 months from now. I think that's plenty of time for you to get a few days off from work beforehand. Don't worry. Oh, all right. That's a relief. I thought it would be much sooner. Why did she seem so relieved when the wedding was months away? Let's keep talking in English, yeah, Nat? We're still working on Sharon's Hungarian, so it's going to take a while. This is already tough. She whispered something in Hungarian before saying that, and this time I understood. I was feeling a bit intimidated by her. It wasn't going as smoothly as it had with his parents, but I reminded myself that not everyone likes you right away. I was sure we would get along with some effort. A few days passed, and I wasn't always at Craig's place, so our interactions were minimal. Whenever I did go there, Natasha would find an excuse to go out, whether it was shopping or going to the movies with friends. I could see the annoyance on Kevin and Mila's faces. One time when I showed up, Kevin said, "You better not be leaving us today, Nat. You've watched enough films for the week. Spend some time with Sharon and your brother this afternoon." Natasha rolled her eyes and said, "Oh my God, not this again. I've met her and we've talked. Do I really have to keep doing it? I don't want to get to know her. I already know enough people. She looks like every other girl. I've met her already, so I don't see the big deal. Natasha, English please. This is the 6th time this week." Okay, I won't be gone long. I'll come back and spend plenty of time with both of you, I promise. Sharon, oh, that's okay. I hope you do come back though. I'd really love to know more about you and your work and everything. Me too. It's just that my friends keep making plans, and since I haven't been home in a while, they're being very stubborn. You must have friends, right? You understand. What if she doesn't? What if she wants you to stay but is too nice to say it? I thought we were speaking in English, ma. Seriously, what did I just say? It's okay, guys, don't stress about it because of me. I'm learning Hungarian anyway, so maybe you won't have to switch to English for me. How lovely. Anyway, I'll be right back for lunch, or else Mama Bear here will fry me like a fish for dinner. Bye now, see you all soon. And then she left to hang out with her friends again. I found it interesting that she stayed in touch with her friends even after moving so far away. I guess they must have grown up together. I didn't expect her to keep her promise and join us for lunch, but to my surprise, she showed up right on time. She looked annoyed to be there. Like she'd much rather be with those friends she kept talking about. I guess she finally gave in. We talked about how their home had changed over the years and how Kevin's jokes had gotten a bit lamer. It was all fun. Then I decided to ask Natasha what she did in New York. So Matt, what do you do in New York? I'm an interior designer. I've designed some of the best places out there. I keep asking these two oldies to let me redesign this old house, but they never listen. I was hoping you'd knock some sense into them. This is the house you grew up in. It's beautiful the way it is. Come on, Sharon, help me out here. I mean, those weird beige couches are killing me. I actually like it here. Those couches are comfortable too. Of course, she takes their side. She's just trying to be the good girl to get them to like her. Typical. You really have to stop talking about my fiancé like that. What's your problem, Matt? I have no problem. What are you talking about? Is everything okay? Did I say something wrong? Oh, of course you didn't, honey. We were just talking about how the house looks kind of ugly. It's just my opinion though. Your fiancé isn't very keen on it. Hey Nat, that reminds me, you didn't tell me what Rye was up to. Why isn't he joining us? Dad, I told you he was busy. He really wanted to come and see Sharon and Craig, but he couldn't find the time. He'll be free soon, and I'll drag him here the next time I come back. I think he prefers it here anyway. Oh, I'd love to meet him. When did you guys get married? Oh, it feels like ages ago, sweetie, but it was just 2 years back. I was designing his new home, and our eyes just met. We got married 6 months later. Wow, that's beautiful. Please bring him around next time. Yes, of course. Natasha just smiled brightly, and everyone went back to eating. It was pretty awkward after that. The conversation switched to other things like the wedding, the venues, the number of guests, and all that, but Natasha didn't show any interest in any of it. She just ate quietly. I wondered if their family dinners were always like this, but who am I kidding? I knew it was me. My Hungarian had improved enough to know that Natasha didn't really like me much. She thought I was just trying to impress Kevin and Mila so they'd like me. And don't get me wrong, I did want them to be happy with me, but I wasn't going to go out of my way to make that happen. My opinions were and always will be my own, but it seemed like Natasha had made up her mind about me the moment she met us at the airport. The more time I spent around her, the more I started catching unpleasant phrases in Hungarian. She would talk to her friend on the phone and say things like, I don't know why my idiot brother is marrying this girl. What does he even see in her? She doesn't do or say anything interesting and she has no idea how to speak Hungarian. She'd have more frequent conversations on her phone when we were all together, like she always preferred talking to someone else. Sometimes her phone would ring late at night and she'd be on the call for hours. I assumed it was her husband. She used her words like a sword so often that it pushed me to work even harder on my Hungarian. I felt like I needed to be less meek and stand up for myself a bit more. I wasn't going to just sit there and let Natasha insult me in her language whenever she felt like it, so I became determined. After spending a few days with us, Natasha went back to New York. During that time, I doubled my efforts to learn Hungarian. I was an assistant professor at the university, and even though my subject was linguistics, one of my colleagues, Jenna, was a master in many languages. Hungarian just happened to be one of them. I decided to meet her after hours and talk about my situation. So, as you know, my fiancé is half Hungarian, and like they say, Jenna, knowing someone's language is one step closer to knowing their heart. Not to be cheesy, but I've been trying hard to learn the language. I know a little now, but you're the master. Do you think you could help? Well, I suppose I could. Tell you what, buy me a sandwich for lunch, and I'll let you attend my elementary Hungarian classes for a while. It should be enough to help you catch on to the grammar. That sounds perfect. But you can't attend the whole semester since you're not a student. Attend a few initial classes with the new batch, and I'll help you in private later on. Also, I know you're doing this for your fiancé, sweetie, but are you sure about it? Hungarian is a difficult language to learn. Aren't all languages difficult? I think with enough determination, I can at least become a better conversationalist. A lot of effort also falls on you whenever I ask. Don't worry, I won't mind. Ask as often as you like. Thank you. Oh, I see someone's been working on it, huh? Impressive. Come on, let's go, I'm getting hungry. She laughed, and the two of us headed to the nearest cafeteria. Everything was going smoothly. I knew learning a foreign language was going to be tough, especially since I had to balance it with my work, family, and other commitments. But I was determined. I wanted to be part of this family, and learning the language was a big step toward that. Plus, getting back at Natasha a little bit would be worth it. The next week, I started attending Jenna's lectures. She was so good with the language that I could have mistaken her for a native speaker. Her accent was spot on. Since I wasn't going to get more than a month of learning, I made sure to take notes whenever possible. She would always check in with me after each lecture, and I don't think I could have found a better teacher. Meanwhile, Natasha returned a month later. By then, my Hungarian had improved a lot, but I kept it a secret from Craig and the rest of the family. I wanted to surprise everyone by joining in on a conversation out of nowhere, but something happened that stopped me in my tracks. Hello, darling. Oh, how I've missed you. I know the last time wasn't long enough, but here we are again. What do you mean I'll disappear again? I'll come back to you in no time, I promise. Natasha was on the phone again. The family was outside for a barbecue dinner. The three of them were setting the table and firing up the grill, while I had gone inside to get some plates and other things. I already told you I'm here to attend my brother's stupid wedding. He's getting married to this boring-looking high school teacher or something. I don't even know why. But forget about them, this is all about us. Do you even know how much I love you? If it wasn't for constantly moving around, I'd never leave your side. Oh boy, it seemed like she really missed her husband Rye. I felt a little bad for eavesdropping, so I quickly grabbed the plates and slipped away. But I was glad that I was able to understand almost everything she was saying, even with her unique accent. We set up the table, and the food was quickly prepared. There's nothing like a hot, delicious dinner for everyone to enjoy. So, have you been busy with all day, Nat? Rye misses you that much? Of course he does, Dad. He's my husband, she replied as soon as we sat down to eat. Oh, I was wondering, does Rye speak Hungarian too? You must have taught him. Oh, I wish, darling. He's a bit dense and already speaks 2 languages. I think his head is rather full at this point to overload it. Yeah, that guy, smarter than anyone in the room but doesn't get a single word of Hungarian. It's so odd, but it's okay. We don't force it on anyone. Wait a second, if Rye doesn't speak a word of Hungarian, then who was Natasha talking to? I let the thought sink in. I knew I had to dig a bit deeper before jumping to conclusions. So I asked, is Ray going to join us anytime soon? Didn't you say you'd bring him home this time? No, unfortunately, he's left the country for a while for some business in Texas, but he said he'll try to swing by on his way to New York. Nat, the wedding is next week. I don't know about you, but I need him to be here. That's an order from the father of the bride. Chill out, Dad. He'll be here, I promise. Okay, fine, he better be. At that moment, I felt like showing off my Hungarian skills, but I kept quiet. Ray was away on a business trip, and Natasha rarely spent time with us whenever she was home. She was always talking to someone in perfect Hungarian. Something didn't feel right about the whole situation. After all, where did she go all the time? Surely her friends had work to do, so who was she spending so much time with? I needed to dig a bit deeper. A few days passed, and Natasha's behavior became more aggressive. My mother-in-law and I were going dress shopping with some friends. Natasha looked uninterested, but Mila dragged her along anyway. I wasn't too keen on having her there, but I couldn't say no to my mother-in-law. We found the perfect white dress, which felt just right for the wedding. I still remember what Natasha mumbled when I tried it on. There's no way I've been dragged all the way here just for this woman to pick that dress. It's completely classless and not even worth pennies. Sorry, what was that, Nat? I didn't quite catch you. I said it looks so beautiful on you, I could cry. It reminded me of my wedding. Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. Oh, someone's been practicing. 2 words and you're proud? It'll take you 2 years to make a sentence at this pace. I just smiled at her as if I didn't know what she was saying. The days kept rolling by, and the wedding day was getting closer. One day, I was cleaning up at home by myself. Kevin and Craig had gone out to buy something, and we ladies were alone in the house. Natasha had just received a package from someone. It looked like a gift. I was cleaning around anyway, so I decided to walk over to the hall right outside her room. She was already on the phone, screaming in excitement. "Oh my God, you didn't? This dress is so pretty, and you remembered my size and my colors, Sergio. My dense husband could never." "Wait, who's Sergio? Is Natasha having an affair?" I didn't want to think about this possibility. In fact, I hoped my suspicions were wrong, but the more I heard her talk, the more real it became for me. I won't go into all the details, but it seemed like they met right here, years before she got married. Poor Ray has no idea, does he? Even the family seems clueless. However, I didn't expect to let it all out so easily when she spoke up about me at my wedding. The day arrived and the ceremony gave me butterflies. Craig and I were finally united, but it was the after party that was the highlight of the evening. Natasha had invited her friends over, and some of the family's cousins were there too. Ray had flown in from Texas for the wedding, and he seemed like a great guy, but Natasha barely paid any attention to him. She looked like she had something to drink because she was louder than usual, laughing and giving me bold looks. I couldn't hear what she was saying because this was my moment. I didn't want to pay attention to her, but then it happened. She said something like, "I'm so done with this whole wedding. Honestly, I'm just here to drink and look prettier than the bride. I give this marriage tops a year before my brother gets bored of her, like a dog with a dirty bone. Mark my words." And that was it. Something inside me snapped. When everyone was at the table, I lifted a glass and tapped it with a spoon to make a toast. That's when I let out all the Hungarian I'd practiced for so long. Even Jenna was at the table, and I knew I had to impress her. So, as you all know, I've been practicing my Hungarian for a while now. Today, I can proudly give a speech without stumbling, all thanks to my teacher Jenna. Thank you, Jenna. But today isn't about you or me, it's about Craig and his family. I've loved everyone so much. Mila, Kevin, oh, and my dear Natasha. I thought Natasha was the perfect sister to my Craig, but you know, maybe that's why I was so disappointed in her. Disappointed? Can you speak in English so we all understand, please? Oh, I'm sure Natasha will fill you in, Ray. Anyway, a few weeks have passed now, and I can't keep this in anymore. Nat, I'm so sorry for you and Ray, but whatever you've been through, I don't think cheating on such a good man is the right thing to do. Could you please put down that glass and tell everyone who Sergio is? Natasha's jaw dropped, her eyes wide open as the blood drained from her face. She stuttered as she tried to speak. What are you talking about, you insane woman? I'm sorry, is it too difficult for you to get in Hungarian with all the wine you've had today? Let me put it simply, Sergio. He's your secret lover, isn't he, Nat? He gave you that beautiful dress you've been talking about on the phone all this time. Honey, what is going on right now? Ask your sister. She's the one who's been cheating on Ray for so long. How long exactly, Nat? Care to tell us in either of the two languages? The whole dinner table fell silent. Natasha was getting all sorts of looks from everyone. Ray looked like he was in complete disbelief. It was as if someone had dropped a bomb in the middle of the room. Is this true? Ray asked. Natasha didn't say a word. Tears began rolling down her face as she slammed her glass on the table and ran off. Ray just sat there, shell-shocked by everything. The table was silent for a while until I announced it was time to hit the dance floor. Soon, everyone decided to deal with the awkwardness later and danced a few steps with their partners and dates. Rai and Natasha disappeared from the wedding. A few months later, their divorce came through quite unexpectedly. I never heard from Natasha again, and she never came back home. Mila and Kevin were quite disappointed in her for what she did, and it was awkward between us for a while. But they appreciated that I exposed her sooner rather than later. Either way, that look of sheer fright and anguish on her face was worth it. I don't think she'll ever find a man as good as Rai again. Good riddance to her for sure.
Let me begin by apologizing for the length of this story. When I was 15, my dad passed away. He and my mom weren't particularly close at that time, so while his death hit me hard, my mom didn't seem as affected as one might expect. I decided to join the military at the age of 17, spending my first year away from home. During my absence, my mom remarried, but I didn't really connect with my stepdad. We had different personalities, and he often made snide remarks, telling me to toughen up whenever I was upset about something. Although both of us were at fault for our disagreements, they never escalated too far. After serving for nearly 5 years, I was medically discharged. My mom and stepdad welcomed me back home, assuring me it was a happy reunion. I intended it to be brief, just until I found a job and got back on my feet. I even offered to pay rent, but they declined. However, just 3 days after returning home, my stepdad approached me about contributing to the rent. I was puzzled, but since it was his house, we agreed on an arrangement. Strangely, he never mentioned this to my mom, so I assumed he preferred to keep it between us. I never asked for assistance from them, not out of spite, but because I wanted to be independent. In contrast, my stepdad, who was only slightly older than me, had received substantial financial support from my mom and her husband. They paid for his education, his car, and his living expenses throughout college and beyond. It felt disheartening that he received all this help, while I was immediately asked to pay rent. Despite our age difference, we got along fairly well. The only issue was this disparity in support. After 3 months, I moved out and soon after met a girl I was crazy about. We started dating, and I was ecstatic throughout the relationship. However, I was apprehensive about introducing her to my mom, fearing her judgment. Surprisingly, my worries were unfounded. My mom and my girlfriend got along remarkably well. My girlfriend didn't have much of a family, and my mom and stepdad became like family to her. They bonded so well that they would hang out together, sometimes just the two of them. I was thrilled to see this connection, and my stepdad even liked her, which brought us closer together, a bond I hadn't known I wanted until then. My stepdad had overcome significant challenges in his life. His father had abandoned their family, and he managed to put himself through school, securing a high-paying job on his own. I admire his self-reliance immensely. After a year of dating, I knew I wanted to marry this girl. When I shared my feelings with my mom and stepdad, they seemed genuinely happy. She had already become an integral part of our family, practically one of us. My mom then handed me her engagement ring, a precious heirloom from my dad, which she had kept. The job I had didn't pay much, so I thought, even if it wasn't the ultimate ring, it should always have a special place. I considered it a great placeholder. When I proposed to my girlfriend with the ring, she told me it wasn't just a placeholder. She absolutely loved it. I had never been happier in my life. We started planning our wedding, and to my surprise, my mom and stepdad offered to help with the finances. It was the first time they had offered me financial assistance, and it felt surreal. Fast forward about 3 months, I received a call from my stepdad, and it felt ominous. I went over to their place after work. When I arrived, I saw my mom, stepdad, stepbrother, and my fiancé, who was sitting on the couch, clearly upset. I thought someone had died. I moved to sit next to her, but my stepdad stopped me. He accused me of cheating on her throughout our entire relationship. I was baffled and denied the accusations vehemently. I told everyone there that I never even texted other women I wasn't related to besides my fiancé. Apparently, some girl had obtained my fiancé's number and claimed that we had been having an affair for over a year. She didn't know I was in a committed relationship. She sent my fiancé screenshots of alleged conversations and details about my life that a stranger shouldn't know. I couldn't grasp what was happening. I was shocked, heartbroken, and furious. My fiancé looked at my phone, confirming I had never sent those messages. Both she and my mother were in tears, and I couldn't hold back my own. My stepdad hurled every insult he could think of at me and forcibly escorted me out of the house. He warned that if he ever saw me on his property again, he'd involve the police. In the following weeks, I tried desperately to contact them, sending calls, texts, voicemails, and messages on every available app. But there was no response. After a month of silence, my stepdad called, instructing me to stop trying to reach my fiancé. He made it clear that I was no longer welcome in their home or around their family. I attempted to call my mother during that time, but she didn't answer either. All I received was a text expressing her sadness and disappointment. My mom didn't have much family, so they usually spent holidays with my stepdad's relatives. They all ostracized me, sharing Christmas photos on Facebook where my ex-fiancé appeared happy and content, which devastated me. The only family member who stood by me was my dad's brother and his family. Even they seemed hesitant around me. The only person who truly believed my innocence was my uncle. I genuinely believe I wouldn't have made it without him. He showed me the kind of fatherly love I had been missing, and I can't express how grateful I am for him. About 6 months after the incident, I decided to move away from the East Coast and settled down in California, needing a fresh start. Less than a year after my move, I received a call from a familiar area code back home, which was rare. I hesitantly answered, and it was my stepbrother on the line. I promptly hung up, feeling a mix of emotions. He called back, and after much internal debate, I answered that night. The conversation was awkward at best. He told me my ex-fiancée had been devastated for a long time. It took her nearly a year to even consider dating again. Meanwhile, I hadn't moved on at all. A few months into her dating attempts, my stepdad encouraged my stepbrother to ask her out. Things seemed all right in the beginning, but they never really clicked. Apparently, my stepbrother confided in my stepdad about this, who, in a fit of misguided advice, told him, "I didn't get rid of my name for nothing. She's a great girl. You need to figure it out with her." I was dumbfounded, quickly replaced by anger. It turned out my stepdad had orchestrated a scheme. He got a girl I didn't know to pose as someone I had an affair with, forging message screenshots and sending them to my ex-fiancée. My stepbrother had been burdened by this information for about a month before he finally revealed the truth to me. He was planning to tell my mom and ex-fiancée the next day. I asked him to hold off on contacting me, giving me time to process everything. That was last Tuesday. I reached out to him recently, telling him I was ready to talk to them, and they could call me tomorrow. I don't know what to say, and I'm uncertain about forgiveness. So far, the only person I've confided in is my uncle, who I asked to keep this to himself. I apologize again for the length of this. My therapist happened to be on vacation, and I needed an outlet. As for the top advice before reading the updates, you're right. My stepfather is toxic, insecure, and narrow-minded. I genuinely appreciate your perspective. I've come to realize that staying no contact with them is the best decision for my well-being. While I might understand why my ex-fiancée believed the false accusations, it doesn't mean I should rebuild any kind of relationship with her. She didn't trust me or give me a chance to prove my innocence. There are plenty of other women out there who won't be easily manipulated or carry the baggage of mistrust. I'm deeply sorry for all the pain this situation has caused, but I acknowledge that my life will be happier without any of them in it. I can see that this is a lot for you to digest, and I'm relieved that the truth has finally come to light. You have every right to take your time in deciding whether you want to rebuild the relationships that were damaged. It's important to remember that you have the option to do what's best for you. I strongly recommend starting therapy as well, as it can be a valuable resource for processing everything you've been through. We would love to hear from you again and support you as you navigate this challenging situation. As for the first update, I apologize for the delay. It's completely understandable given the circumstances. Your stepbrother reached out to you this morning and provided more details about what happened. Apparently, what your stepfather had initially told you wasn't the whole truth. He was careful with his words, seemingly to avoid directly implicating himself, but heavily implying his actions. It's worth noting that your stepbrother is quite astute. He didn't rush to confront your mother and fiancée in a shouting match with his dad. Instead, he took a more thoughtful approach that you might not have considered. He managed to track down a girl who had been in contact with your stepfather, presumably through Tinder. This discovery strongly suggests that your stepfather had been involved in extramarital affairs, which understandably angered you for obvious reasons. The girl admitted that she didn't sleep with your stepfather, but the truth or falsehood of that statement didn't hold much significance for you. What mattered was that your stepbrother talked to her sharing the story and convincing her to cooperate. It appears that she was well aware of her actions, and the revelation of what happened to you seemed to affect her profoundly. Regardless of her motives, her willingness to cooperate was what counted. She was compensated with $1,000 for making a phone call, and she was given instructions on what to say and provided pictures as evidence. Your stepbrother also offered to pay her again, for the record. She agreed to do it without charge, and it happened just yesterday. My stepfather is away on a business trip until Wednesday, so it was just the four of them there. She came in and spilled everything to my mom and ex-fiancé. My stepbrother mentioned that tears started flowing almost immediately from all three of them after he disclosed everything. He informed them that I was in California and that he would let them know when I was ready to be contacted. To provide some context, here's a bit of backstory to help you understand my mother and ex-fiancé a little better. Please note that this is not an excuse for their actions. It's merely meant to shed light on their behavior. After my dad passed away, my mother and I became incredibly close. We were each other's support system. However, when I turned 16, I started drinking to cope with my emotions. One New Year's Eve, I ended up out with my friends, leaving my mom alone at home. She texted me, expressing her sadness about being by herself. And from that moment, things were never quite the same between us. My mother has always been the type of person who needs someone around. She struggles to handle being alone. When her love for my dad started to fade, I felt the void. Later, when I grew up and moved out, my stepfather filled that void. As for my ex-fiancée, she never had much of a family and had serious trust issues due to her past relationships. Despite her difficult past, she never spoke ill of her ex-boyfriends, except for one who was physically abusive, a clear exception. Despite my own shyness, I've been told I'm cute, particularly by younger girls, although I never liked that label as it didn't feel very masculine. Eventually, I learned to appreciate my features and how easily I blushed. My fiancé, who is nearly 3 years older than me, preferred older girls. I never paid much attention to younger girls who showed interest in me, yet they continued to approach me. This attention bothered my fiancée. She would often question why I wasn't interested in these younger girls or why I didn't leave her for someone younger and more attractive. I always found her incredibly attractive, much more so than I ever saw myself, and I constantly reassured her of that. I made it clear that no other girl held any appeal for me. I hope this insight provides some context for why I think they did what they did and believed what they believed. However, this is not an excuse for their actions, and personally, I am not that understanding. At the end of the call with my brother, he mentioned that both my mom and my ex-fiancée wanted to call me today. I agreed, so I waited patiently. Around 3 p.m., I started to feel a bit puzzled. I began to wonder if my brother had made everything up just to mess with me. This thought genuinely worried me. Then, I received a text from him, asking if I was all right. I replied yes and inquired if they were actually planning on calling. He informed me they had been trying for the past few hours. I had blocked both of them when I moved out west, but somehow I had forgotten to block him. I felt grateful that I hadn't, though. I blocked their calls, and about 10 minutes later, I received a call from my mom. The first thing she said was that I sounded different. I almost hung up right then. It took all I had to just respond with a quiet yeah. She immediately broke down, and I thought I'd feel something more, but the pain of it all just overwhelmed me. She asked if I had received her texts, and I said no. I guess she had been trying to text me over the last year, but I had her number blocked. If she truly wanted to reach me, she could have found a way. It might sound harsh, but I know it's true. I told her I would be willing to rebuild some semblance of a relationship with time, and she seemed content with that. She also informed me that she was removing all her belongings from the house before my stepfather returned, and that she would be filing for divorce immediately. I believed her. She might be a poor excuse for a mother in my eyes, but she's never been someone to take half measures. I really wish I could be there to witness that man's face when he comes back to an empty home. Next, my ex-fiancé got on the phone and offered tearful apologies, much like my mom did. I felt something more talking to her. I tried to get her to remember how many times I assured her I would never betray her and how much I loved her. She was beside herself, and honestly, I'm glad we talked. We had about half an hour of conversation, and I even allowed myself to entertain the thought, despite telling myself for over a year that it would never happen, that there could still be something between us. She mentioned she still had the engagement ring, which upset me deeply. I told her to give it to my mom because it no longer belonged to either of us. I could tell this crushed her, and I'll admit, selfishly, I wanted it to. She asked if she could call or text me. I said it's fine, but not to expect a prompt response either way. I essentially gave her the same ultimatum as my mom. I told her that the chances of us having a future relationship were very slim, which was saddening. She understood this as well. I spoke to my brother last, expressing my gratitude for everything he had done. He was helping my mom retrieve her belongings from my stepfather's house, and he apologized for all that had transpired. He informed me that he was going to disclose the entire situation to the rest of the family, with whom I have no connection and don't anticipate communicating with, except for my stepkid's mother, who happens to be the oldest person in either of our families. She had wished me a happy birthday and Merry Christmas over the last year. Perhaps she doesn't care due to her age, or maybe she felt remorse, but I intend to speak with her. I apologize for all the rambling. I'll be flying home for my uncle's 60th birthday in the first week of March. It will be my first time back since I moved out here, and I definitely plan on seeing my brother. While I'm not opposed to seeing my mom and ex-fiancé, I've made it clear to them that I have a lot of healing to do, as do they. If anything further develops, I will provide another update, perhaps after my trip home. For now, this is the last of what I have to share. I haven't been active on social media much in the last year for obvious reasons, and I haven't come across any similar stories to mine that have been referenced in the comments, but I'd appreciate any if you can find them. Thank you to everyone. In the second update, I received a call from a number back home. I had deleted most of my numbers a while ago from anyone I wasn't in touch with. I answered the call, and it was my stepfather. I immediately hung up and blocked the number. After that, I called my mom, fiancé, and brother to make sure they were safe. My mom is staying at a hotel that he doesn't know about, while my fiancé and brother are at their own residences and feel adequately protected. My stepfather has not shown any indications of being a violent man, but it's better to be safe than sorry. My brother told me that he had received a call from him this morning, but he refused to answer. He just informed him about the situation and told him not to contact any of them. I'm not sure how long my stepfather sat there, but he called me around 3 p.m. Pacific time. About an hour ago, I received a message from a different number saying, "We need to talk." I assume it's him, and I haven't responded. That's the latest. In the third update, my stepkid's mother called me. I had her number saved due to the reasons I mentioned earlier. I was a bit concerned that it might have been him trying to gather information, but it wasn't. She's a very kind lady who didn't have to be nice to me in any way, but she showed me compassion. She was very pleasant and wished me well, while also apologizing on behalf of the family. I thanked her and wished her the best as well. It was surprising that this message came from her.
I don't want to marry someone who only makes $900 a month. There's no reply from my mother-in-law on the phone. Maybe she's stunned. Hello, are you there? I'm talking about the mother of a man who only earns $900 a month. What are you talking about? I'm saying Aaron only makes $900 a month from his part-time job. I think you might be missing a zero. No, I'm not. It's really $900 a month. My name is Maria, and I'm a 29-year-old housewife. I've been married to my husband, Aaron, for 5 years, and we live in an apartment. We don't have children yet, and though we're not rich, we live comfortably and happily, doing work we enjoy. About 6 months ago, things started to change. My mother-in-law, who lives nearby, demanded to move in with us. Despite our efforts to explain that we couldn't accommodate her, she didn't listen. To my surprise, Aaron supported her, which caused a lot of tension between us. Then Aaron made a troubling decision. After my father-in-law passed away a few years ago, my mother-in-law had been living alone and managing fine. But she started feeling uncomfortable being by herself and wanted to move in with us. The real reason, though, was that her house was old and falling apart. She didn't want to pay for the renovations, so she figured moving in with us would solve her problem. When we got married, Aaron promised that we wouldn't live with his parents. His parents' house is just a 10-minute drive away, so if she needs anything, we can easily go there. Also, I know my mother-in-law has never liked me and often makes sarcastic comments. If she moves in with us, she might become even more difficult. On top of that, she recently quit her part-time job and is now unemployed. If she moves in with us, we would have to cover her living expenses too, which we just can't afford right now. Despite this, my mother-in-law said, "Don't be so proud when my son supports you financially." I tried to explain that I work from home and Aaron doesn't support me financially, but she ignored me. She insisted that with Aaron's income, we could live comfortably, but we can't manage on his income alone. So I asked her if she knew how much Aaron makes each month. She replied confidently, "Of course. He's my son, and you're lucky he's well paid." Really? How so? If my husband's salary were really high, then a part-time job working just 3 days a week would pay well too, I said. My mother-in-law, acting superior, offered to handle the housework so I could focus on work. She then criticized me, saying, "You can't manage your finances well even though my son earns so much. Aren't you a big spender?" I responded, "No, I'm working hard every day and saving money. I'm not a spender." She then said, "Aside from money, this apartment is too small for 3 adults." When I mentioned that, she casually asked, "Do you want to move to a bigger place or buy a house?" Aaron, influenced by his mother, started to change his mind. I wondered if he couldn't stand up to her or if he actually wanted to live with her. He began to complain, telling me not to be so stubborn about his mother. He even said something that made me question his true feelings. "It's more enjoyable to live with my mother, isn't it?" Aaron asked. "What are you talking about?" "He says she'll take care of the housework for you. It would make things easier for you, Maria." Aaron seemed fully on board with the idea of moving in with his mother. I didn't know what to do. I tried to resist as much as I could, but out of frustration, Aaron took drastic action. While I was out for the day, he moved out of our apartment. When I came home that night and saw that his things were gone, I immediately called him. "Where are you? All your stuff is missing." "Yes, I moved out." "You moved out? Where did you go?" "I bought a house." "Bought a house? With what money?" Hello." It sounded like my mother-in-law was covering the phone. "Yes, that's right. My son and I will be living in the new house for a while. We might move in with you later if you change your mind. You probably can't even afford the rent there on your own. You better be sorry." "Okay, well, excuse me. Hello?" My mother-in-law kept making sarcastic comments, but I felt ridiculous and ended the call quickly. They bought a house? They must be lying. There's no way Aaron and my mother-in-law could afford a house with their finances. I don't know where they are, but they can do whatever they want. Honestly, I can live on my own without Aaron and manage financially. I was already paying the rent myself, so I'm not worried. I started seriously thinking about divorce. A few days later, I got a call from my brother. "Hey Maria, long time no talk. You know Aaron and his mother are at my house, right?" "What?" "My brother owns a house. After he bought it, he got transferred, and I've been managing the house since then." "Hold on a second." I immediately checked the safe in the bedroom. The key to my brother's house is missing. "Tom, the key is gone." "Did you call Aaron?" "No, I'm actually watching the house from outside." "I'm sorry, Tom. It's a long story. I think I have a pretty good idea of what's going on." "What should I do?" "We can call the police right away." "Yeah, but they're your family. I don't think the police will intervene." "That's true. I'm sorry. I'll handle it in a couple of days. Can I ask you to wait a bit?" "Okay, let me know if there's anything I can do to help." "Thanks." As soon as I got off the phone with my brother, I called my husband. "Oh, I hope you're feeling sorry by now. Why is my mother-in-law picking up? Where are you?" "Oh, you don't sound very sorry, do you?" Where are you? I don't mean to tell you anything, my mother-in-law said smugly. You're desperate, aren't you? You don't want to give up your husband with a $9,000 monthly salary, she continued. $9,000 salary? Who were you talking about? Of course it's my son. A son with enough money to buy such a splendid house. Ha ha ha. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. What's so funny? She asked, sounding offended. Aaron said that if you don't listen to him, he's willing to divorce you. I see. Then divorce is fine, I replied calmly. How stubborn are you? If he dumps you, he won't be able to make it on your own, will you? Of course I will, I said confidently. I don't want a husband who only makes $900 a month. There was no response from my mother-in-law on the other end of the phone. Maybe she was speechless. Hello? Are you there, the mother of a man who only makes $900 a month? I asked again. What are you talking about? She finally replied. I'm saying that Aaron makes $900 a month from his part-time job, I explained. I think you're missing a zero, she said. No, I'm not. It's $900 a month. When I asked Aaron about his salary, he said around 9. Yes, that's right, around 9, I confirmed. Well, I guess it's hard to believe that your son only makes $900, I said. $9,000 is quite a high salary, she replied, still clinging to her misconception. It was thanks to my salary that we could pay all our expenses. By the way, my salary is around $500. You mean $5,000, according to how you're thinking. I'm not being supported by him. My husband quit his job a few years ago. Since then, he's only worked part-time 3 days a week. When I told my mother-in-law about this, she didn't react. I continued with my story. By the way, the house you're living in right now, the one you think my husband bought, it actually belongs to my brother. What? No, Aaron bought this house, she insisted. My brother bought the house, and I was in charge of it while his family lives in another area. He gave me the key, and Aaron took it without permission. What you and Aaron did is a criminal act, and I'm going to report it to the police. Wait a minute, my mother-in-law blurted out, clearly caught off guard. Okay, we'll leave, but please don't call the police. My mother-in-law hung up the phone, shouting. I'm sure she and Aaron are in a heated discussion now. When I went to check on my brother's house afterward, both Aaron and my mother-in-law were gone. They must have rushed back to her house in a panic. I immediately contacted my brother and apologized for the trouble my husband had caused. I still had one thing left to do, divorce my selfish husband. I signed the divorce papers and sent them to my in-laws' house. A short while later, my husband called me in a panic. You're kidding, right? I'm sorry, and I apologize about the house. So please reconsider, Aaron pleaded over the phone. I can't be married to a thief. Please enjoy living with your mother, whom you love so much. I can't stay with someone who doesn't respect me. Get a full-time job and good luck making $9,000 a month, I replied firmly. Aaron didn't sign the divorce papers right away, so I hired a lawyer. With legal help, the divorce was granted without much hassle. I was finally free from the impossible situation of dealing with my husband and mother-in-law trying to force me into living with them. My ex-husband and mother-in-law continued to live in their shabby house. Aaron tried to find a full-time job by going to the unemployment office, but because he had been working part-time for so long, it was difficult for him to find a company willing to hire him full-time. They are still living on his $900 income, and my mother-in-law had to start working part-time again. My mother-in-law now complains to him every day, and they fight constantly. I moved out of the apartment I had shared with Aaron and into a new place. I no longer have to support him financially, and now that I'm on my own, I can focus on my work from home even more than before. My income is steadily increasing, and once I save up enough money, I'm planning to buy a house for myself. Her husband just didn't understand his own situation, did he? If he had thought about it properly, he should have been grateful to his wife. Instead, because he didn't appreciate her, he ended up in this unfortunate situation. It's a good thing that Maria divorced him. Maria, enjoy your peaceful life from now on. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one.
Ding dong, clatter, clatter, bang, bang, bang. Are you kidding me? Let me in right now. Do you want everyone to see me causing a scene here? Is this how you treat your husband who's been working on Christmas and comes home to this mess? My husband was furious, pounding on the gate of my family's home. Christmas is usually a special time for us, just before the big day. I accidentally found an envelope recently that revealed my husband's betrayals. As a wife and mother, I've been living through miserable and hopeless days since then. He had been working late, he said, but really he was spending our money on his girlfriend. He barely even bought presents for our kids. I couldn't stand it anymore. I opened the door and confronted him in front of my family. And then, what? What's going on? I'm just an ordinary housewife, living with my husband and 2 children. Depending on your values, some people might spend Christmas Eve with a boyfriend or girlfriend and Christmas Day with their family. And that's how it was for me. I have a brother and a sister, and since we were young, if any of us were dating someone, we'd spend Christmas Eve with them. Our family does things a bit differently from others. We don't always celebrate Christmas on the 25th because of our jobs. Both our parents and us have work that keeps us busy even on holidays. So instead, we made our own tradition, celebrating Christmas when we all had time off during the winter break. We'd cook together, enjoy cake, and watch special year-end TV shows. As we grew up and became independent, my brother, sister, and I kept up this tradition in our own ways. A few years ago, I got married and had children of my own. At first, celebrating Christmas Eve with my husband and our child was a joyful time. But over time, our relationship changed from being romantic partners to focusing more on our family as a whole. Christmas Eve started to feel more like a routine than a special occasion. Eventually, we both agreed that our children's happiness was what mattered most at Christmas. Any discussion about what to do on Christmas Eve slowly faded away. So when my husband said, "Sorry, I might be stuck at work overnight on the 24th. The kids celebrate Christmas on the 25th, right? I'll try to be back by then." It felt like a natural progression of how our Christmas traditions had evolved. I wasn't particularly emotional when I realized my husband wouldn't be home for Christmas Eve. It was just another sign of how our relationship had changed over time. Despite this, I still love him deeply and I'm content with our life together. So I focused on preparing for our kids' Christmas alone, considering it another form of happiness. Hey, is this all the money we have for living expenses this month? Did something unusual happen with your paycheck? I hate to sound critical, but expenses always pile up at year-end. I was hoping we could stretch our budget a bit more with Christmas coming up in about a month. I was shocked to see that the money my husband gave for living expenses was significantly less than usual. I quickly pleaded with him. If I could have managed it, I would have done so already. Things are tight on my end too. There are work-related parties and expenses that I have to cover upfront for the new year. Do you think I enjoy cutting back like this? Managing our budget with limited resources is also a crucial part of being a housewife, isn't it? My husband seemed visibly frustrated and avoided looking at me or talking further. You're right, sorry. I'll do my best too. But it's almost Christmas, right? The kids are eagerly waiting for their special presents. Please, for their sake, let's make this time of year special. I don't want us to not afford their gifts. In our family, there's a rule. Normally, if the kids want something, they have to explain why they need it. But for birthdays and Christmas, they can ask for anything without conditions. That's why I wanted to ensure we have enough money for them, thinking about how much they love Christmas. Honey, let's be a bit more careful with our spending. Kids, what do you want for Christmas? My husband sighed loudly and called the kids over. I want a cartoon DVD set, but I also want a picture book about trains, Dad. Which one do you think is better? Well, the book, definitely. It will help you learn to read, and you can share it with your friends at their houses. You could even read it to younger friends. You'd be such a cool big boy. I really want a new doll set so I can feed it and sleep with it, but my crayons broke recently and now I can't draw. I wonder which wish Santa will grant. I think crayons would be great, Lena. You're so talented at drawing, and I love seeing your artwork. Ask Santa for some really nice ones, even better than the ones you had before. But what about the dolls? Can't you listen to what I want? Santa only visits good children. Naughty kids who are selfish get nothing. I'll ask for crayons. While pretending to listen to the kids, my husband clearly pushed them towards the cheaper options. Aaron's gift can be from a used bookstore, and Lena's gift can be from the dollar store. This way, we won't have to spend extra money on Christmas. Do you think spending money is the only solution? How foolish, he sneered, making sure only I could hear him. Extra expenses? That's not saving money. My husband called our children's eagerly anticipated presents extra expenses, manipulating their innocent minds to suit his agenda. I began to deeply resent such behavior from my husband. Then, after a while, Mom, look, a sparkly letter. It was in Dad's work bag. Could it be from Santa? While my husband was in the bath, my daughter had apparently opened his work bag and excitedly showed me the beautifully decorated envelope she found. "You shouldn't have taken that without asking. Give it here and I'll put it back, okay?" What could it be? I took the envelope from my daughter. Since it hadn't been opened, curiosity got the better of me and I peeked inside. A reservation for a Christmas dinner for 2 at a hotel on the 24th. But he was supposed to be working overnight on the 24th. Several questions raced through my mind. Just then, my husband's phone made a notification sound. Startled, I glanced over at his phone. It seemed to be getting a flurry of messages in a short span of time. Normally, I wouldn't pay much attention to his phone or how often it rang, but with a sense of unease, I reached for it. What's going on? My eyes fixed on the screen. All the messages flooding my husband's phone were from someone named Nancy. Judging by the selfie that appeared to be her profile picture, she was much younger than me. Although I couldn't see the content of the messages, the heart emojis made it clear they were not just from a casual acquaintance. It seemed too coincidental. A small dark suspicion about my husband began to grow within me. Once I started doubting him, it was hard to let go of those feelings. For the next few days, I found myself sneaking peeks at my husband's phone. Those days were enough to turn my suspicions into conviction. Nancy was likely my husband's mistress, and he planned to spend the Christmas dinner with her on the 24th. He even hinted at an extra special gift for her, their excitement for each other uncontainable. To get more concrete information, I hired a private investigator. Catching my overly confident husband in the act seemed easy, and the results came back quickly. According to the investigation, Nancy was a temp at my husband's company. They had started their affair a month ago, and all the nights he told me he was working late were actually spent with Nancy. The recent drastic cut in our living expenses was likely to fund his affair with her. Clutching the investigator's report, tears of frustration overflowed. In just 1 month, my husband had come to prioritize another woman over his family. My efforts in taking care of the house, believing he was busy with work, and our children's kindness in holding back their desire to play with their father, all felt unbearably pathetic. The shock of my husband's betrayal was too significant to ignore. I didn't know what to do at first, but I have a plan of my own. I won't let this slide without a fight. Wiping away my tears, I stood up energetically and began to prepare my own special gift for my husband. On the morning of December 24th, I sent off my husband as usual, then I headed to my parents' house with the kids. "Welcome. It's been so long since we've all been together like this. It feels just like when you, your brother, and your sister used to live here," my mom said. "Spending quality time with Dad is great, but this year felt especially exciting." At my parents' house, they were delighted by the festive Christmas atmosphere, enjoying decorating a large Christmas tree they had pulled out of storage. With the kids, we spent the entire day having a fun Christmas party. The next morning, the kids were ecstatic about the presents placed at the base of the Christmas tree they had decorated. For my son, I got a DVD and a picture book, and for my daughter, a doll and crayons. We told them these gifts were from Santa and also from Grandpa and Grandma. The kids played happily with their new toys while the adults watched them with smiles. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. I looked at my phone and saw I had a call. I stepped outside to answer it. It was my husband, sounding very upset. "Hey, where are you? I just got home from work, but my key doesn't fit the lock and the doorbell isn't working. What's going on?" I could hear him messing with the door handle through the phone. "Calm down, you're making a lot of noise. No one is there because we don't live there anymore. We finished moving out yesterday. You were too busy with work to notice, I guess. By the way, you've been shaking that doorknob for a while. Isn't that kind of like trying to break in? If you break the door, it's not my problem." I laughed at him. Even though he was still confused, he realized I had tricked him and started yelling angrily. "Don't mess with me, doing all this without telling me. Where did you put my stuff? Bring it back now. All your things were taken by your parents yesterday. They kept apologizing to me, saying how sorry they were for what you did. Make sure to apologize to them when you get back." "What? Huh?" After finding out about my husband's affair, I told both our families everything. I explained how he was obsessed with a younger woman named Nancy, spending our money on her instead of on our family. He even cut down on our living expenses and the kids' Christmas gifts. He lied about working overnight just to be with her, and I decided to ask for a divorce. After I told everyone through tears, my parents, his parents, our siblings, and even the kids supported my decision. So we moved out of the house on Christmas Eve while my mother took care of the children. Our siblings also helped with the move. With everyone's help, we emptied the house quickly, which brings us to now. So everyone knows what you've done, and no one in the family is on your side. You caused this mess, and now you have to deal with it. I explained everything to my husband clearly. By the time I finished explaining everything, my husband was furious and started shouting at me. "You worthless woman! Your disrespectful attitude towards me, your husband, is the real problem here. I am the precious only son, you know. Blaming others while you're no saint yourself, acting all high and mighty. My parents siding with you. Ha, you must have played the victim and cried to them. Who do you think my parents will ultimately believe, their precious son or some outsider woman? You're as foolish as ever, Hava. I'll be demanding alimony from you right away. Oh really? Then go ahead and talk to them now. Here, be my guest. Saying that, I turned on the speakerphone on my cell. Then I never thought you were such a rotten person. Are those the words of someone who has committed adultery? You are the worst. You're the shame of our family. Where did it all go wrong? May and Lars, who had been by my side during the call, unleashed their anger at my husband over the phone. Dad, Mom, why are you with her? My husband began to tremble, utterly taken aback by the unexpected rebuke from his parents. Why? Because it's Christmas. Maitline, who is back at her parents' house, invited us to spend the day with her, even though we are the parents of the man who betrayed his family. Do you understand how Maitline felt all this time? While you were betraying her, she was working hard to take care of the children on her own. We've never been so ashamed and embarrassed of you. We won't defend you unconditionally. You're an adult and made your choices. Do what you want, but don't involve us again. We refuse to be used by you. May and Lars scolded him, their voices trembling with anger. Their words made me so happy I couldn't hold back my tears. What? You're at Maitline's parents' house. Anyway, I'm coming over, so listen to my side of the story. It's unfair to only hear one side at times like these, right? You'll see who the real victim is, right, Dad? Regardless of our situation, my husband tried to win his parents over, but it was pointless. Without listening to his claims, my father-in-law hung up and turned off the phone after saying a few words to me. Then he turned off all our phones, including Maitline's, and said, "Let's go back inside. The kids are waiting for their mom." My father-in-law said this with a gentle smile, and my mother-in-law gently patted my back. We all went back inside together. We then had the most enjoyable Christmas party ever, with delicious food, cake, and the children singing and dancing. As the night went on and the children fell asleep, the adults were relaxing when the doorbell started ringing non-stop. Tension filled the room. Everyone knew who would show up uninvited at this hour. Yes, it's me. Open the door. Are you going to leave me out in the cold on a winter night? My husband not only kept pressing the doorbell but also started rattling the doorknob as if he might break it. Panic set in, and I was about to go to the door when my parents stopped me. I looked at everyone, nodded, and decided to speak to my husband through the door. Did you forget? Christmas Eve is for lovers and Christmas is for family, right? We're all having a lovely Christmas together as a family. Did you have a nice Christmas Eve with Nancy? Now that we're strangers, I don't care what happens to you today. If you don't want to sleep outside in the cold, just leave. Don't provoke me. Should I call the police? Spread rumors in the neighborhood that a cruel wife kicked out her husband for no reason. Open this door right now. No matter what I said, my husband refused to listen and continued causing a scene outside. I started feeling afraid at his persistence. Trembling, my father-in-law smoothly stood up. He exchanged glances with my mother-in-law, who also rose to follow him. My parents and I hurried to the front door with them. When my father opened the door, expecting me to give in, my husband stood there defiantly. "Long time no see, Dad," my husband said smugly. "It's not good to see you. Stop pretending we're friends. You're no longer a son to us, just someone who hurt our family," my father interrupted coldly. My mother joined in, causing a scene at this hour. "Do you even know what time it is? It's incredibly rude. The kids have been asleep for hours. You're not fit to be their father." She glared at him sternly. My husband was shocked to see my usually gentle mother so stern. "I won't let my grandchildren see this anymore. Leave. You're a nuisance. You're no longer part of this family." My father-in-law spoke calmly but with anger, making it clear my husband had to leave. My husband glared at us, looking like he might explode. "I'm calling the police right now," my mother-in-law said firmly. Seeing her pick up the phone, my husband panicked and fled without saying a word of apology. It was another stark reminder of who he truly was. I didn't cry anymore, but I felt an emptiness inside, questioning the purpose of everything I had been through until then. "How about some warm tea, and then you can get some rest?" My mother gently touched my shoulder with a kind smile. Everyone welcomed me back with warmth and understanding. I went to my room, grateful for the unwavering support of my family. Meanwhile, my husband, now without a home, went to his parents' house. They had changed the locks after hearing my side of the story, so he couldn't get in. They turned him away when they returned, unwilling to let a stranger into their home. Left out in the cold, my husband finally realized the gravity of his actions and his parents' words. Now he sincerely regrets his actions and has agreed to the divorce and alimony. I had a lawyer ready just in case, but thankfully it didn't turn into a messy legal battle. After the divorce was finalized, I started a new life at my parents' house with my children. I'm focused on my work and raising my kids with the loving support of my parents. It's busy, but every day feels meaningful. Although I won't see my ex-husband again, I stay in touch with my in-laws. They're wonderful grandparents to my children and a great support to me. Even though we're no longer family on paper, I hope they'll always be part of our lives and continue to watch over the children as they grow. Do you both have everything? Let's go. Don't forget to say goodbye to Grandma and Grandpa. Bye. I silently prayed for these ordinary, peaceful days to last forever and looked forward to celebrating next Christmas together as a family, seeing my children's happy smiles.
I have a lazy sister who, believe it or not, made me jeopardize my career by putting my neck on the line to secure her a job. Loyalty to family can sometimes be the greatest burden, and I speak from personal experience. Let me introduce you to my sister, Stella, who is a year younger than me. We are the products of our mother's love life, which never led to marriage. The closest thing we had to a father figure was Uncle Greg, our mother's brother, who had been looking after us for as long as I can remember. It's incredible how, from the way we carried ourselves, you'd never guess we were being supported by someone who had his own family. I graduated from college before Stella and was desperately searching for a job. Knowing Uncle Greg's influence, I approached him for help. After expressing my gratitude for everything he'd done for us, I opened up about my job search. We discussed it for a while, during which I could sense that he was assessing whether my college education had been a waste or not. Fortunately, he seemed satisfied with my qualifications and promised to help me secure a job. Uncle Greg was a man of his word, so I was overjoyed. 3 days later, he called and asked me to bring all my documents to a company. To my amazement, he had secured me a position as the head of human resources. This was beyond my expectations. I had zero experience and was fresh out of college. Nonetheless, I was determined to prove myself, not wanting to let my uncle down. A year later, Stella also graduated from college and embarked on her job hunt, which proved unsuccessful. I suggested that she visit Uncle Greg for assistance, and I planned to accompany her. However, my concern was that Uncle Greg, who had high standards, would be disappointed upon meeting my sister, a law graduate. I too was disappointed, but I knew I had to let Uncle Greg assess Stella for himself. We arrived at Uncle Greg's place, and he engaged my sister in a conversation. I remained mostly silent, and even I could tell that she appeared unrefined. Uncle Greg didn't say anything about my sister, but the disappointment in his eyes was evident. After some time, he promised to help her in her job search. 2 weeks passed, and Stella hadn't received a favorable response from Uncle Greg. She reached out to him, but he would merely say he was working on it. One evening, our mother and sister approached me for a discussion after I returned from work. Exhausted, I asked to have the conversation the following morning before I headed to work. They both woke me up early the next day, and Stella started by expressing her frustration with Uncle Greg, who she believed was taking too long to find her a job. I defended him, emphasizing how good he'd been to us and that she needed to be patient. Stella, however, insinuated that Uncle Greg was now playing favorites between us, citing how quickly he had found me a job, while she had waited for weeks. Our mother chimed in, suggesting a solution for Stella's joblessness. I was initially happy for my sister until I heard the proposed solution. Our mother suggested that I use my influence as the head of human resources in my company to hire Stella as a sales agent with a high salary. I was shocked and turned to Stella to see if it was a joke. Our mother further argued that it was only natural for someone in my position to do so. She claimed that since I was the head of my department, nobody would question the hire. I hesitated to say no immediately and asked Stella if she had any experience as a sales agent. She retorted by asking if it was necessary, given her law degree. It was frustrating to see her demand a job for which she lacked the qualifications and experience. To make matters worse, both she and our mother were insisting on a high salary for her. I made it clear to my family that what they were asking for was simply not feasible. I explained to my mom that Stella's law degree had no connection to my line of work. She raised her voice, insisting that I should look at the bigger picture, which, according to her, was the substantial salary Stella would earn once I secured the job for her. I pointed out that fulfilling their request could jeopardize my career, as it might appear as favoritism if my superiors found out I'd employed someone unfit for the job. My mother and sister, however, dismissed my explanation, accusing me of not prioritizing family success. This was when I truly understood the bondage that family loyalty could become. How could they insinuate that I didn't want our family to succeed just because I declined to risk my career for their sake? It felt like pure selfishness. I reiterated my earlier stance and prepared some food. The rest of the day passed in silence, but the discussion continued to weigh on my mind. There was no way I could accede to their demands. I hadn't even been on the job for 2 years, and it wasn't time to act like I owned the place. My mom and sister started giving me the cold shoulder, essentially trying to guilt-trip me. I felt miserable in my own home, so I began intentionally coming home late to spend less time there. However, that tactic didn't improve the situation. I finally decided to seek advice from someone I knew would offer an unbiased perspective, Uncle Greg. One day, I stopped by Uncle Greg's place on my way home from work and shared everything that had been happening at home, except for the part where Stella accused him of playing favorites. Uncle Greg listened and assured me that getting a job for my sister was not a difficult task for him. He mentioned that he'd been stalling the process because he had doubts about her capabilities for the job, even in her field. He pointed out certain observations he'd made during their discussions, which I agreed with. Uncle Greg explained that if he recommended my sister for a job, it would put his own reputation at risk with his friends who were her potential employers. He made it clear that she didn't meet their expectations and could damage his standing. He also revealed that the talk of not wanting family success was an emotional ploy to manipulate and guilt-trip me into doing their bidding. He urged me not to sacrifice my budding career for my selfish sibling and suggested that I consider moving out of the house and renting my own apartment if the pressure became too much. Uncle Greg's words deeply resonated with me, and he was right. I needed to let my mother and sister understand that I was an independent person who couldn't be swayed in any direction they wished. But despite this realization, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I decided to make a one-time compromise for Stella's sake. One morning, I approached Stella and asked her to come to the office later that day to pick up her appointment letter. The relief in her demeanor was palpable, and my mother smiled, assuring me that I was making the right decision, even though I knew she was wrong. I was unknowingly setting myself up for a major disaster. Stella came to the office, received her appointment letter, and commenced work. However, the real issue was her lack of productivity, which was evident. The problem was that her role was not in her field of expertise. 2 months later, most of the staff began complaining about Stella's performance. I had to address the issue with my sister before it escalated further. I pointed out that she was not contributing to the company, yet she was overpaid compared to some hardworking, productive colleagues. I explained that, under normal circumstances, firing her would be the best option for the company, but I was using my influence to delay such a decision. Stella defended herself, claiming she was still new to the job and needed time to learn the ropes. While her reasoning was understandable, the real problem was her lack of effort and enthusiasm. She seemed to be lethargic, simply waiting for payday. Just as I was about to dismiss her, she dropped the bombshell. Stella said she was considering taking a 1-month paid leave to attend to her health, despite no apparent health issues. I knew this was just an excuse. Here was someone on the verge of facing multiple complaints, and all she seemed interested in was stirring up trouble. I sternly warned Stella against entertaining the idea of a leave and threatened to fire her if she attempted it. I didn't let the matter rest. When I got home, I brought it to our mother's attention. I reminded her of her assurance to help Stella secure a job. And now, barely 2 months into her employment, Stella was requesting 2 months of paid leave. I made it clear to our mother that if Stella's productivity didn't improve by the end of the month, I would ensure she got fired. Our mother downplayed the situation, suggesting that Stella would get the hang of it in due time. She asked me to be patient with my sister. I agreed to give Stella the month to improve her productivity, and my course of action would be determined by her performance. I patiently waited for my sister to step up and be more productive, but it was a regrettable situation for both of us. Unfortunately, my superior got wind of the ongoing complaints and summoned Stella and me. During the review, it was revealed that Stella hadn't been productive since she started as a sales agent, and I had failed to take the necessary action, which would have been reporting the issue to management. My favoritism was exposed, and we were both immediately terminated. I began pleading for my job on the spot, but I was informed that the decision was final. Stella, on the other hand, rather than showing humility, stated that the job was beneath her, considering her educational qualifications, and walked out of the office while I remained on my knees begging to retain my job. I regretted not heeding Uncle Greg's warnings. His predictions had become a reality, and I had allowed my sister to ruin my career. I returned home, a mixture of tears and anger in my heart, only to find Stella casually sitting on the couch with a bowl of popcorn, watching a movie, seemingly undisturbed by the whole ordeal. I immediately confronted Stella, and we started exchanging heated words. Our mother rushed to the scene, trying to calm the situation. At this point, Stella hadn't shared what had happened, and my anger was directed towards our mother. I began shouting at her, holding her responsible for emotionally blackmailing me into bringing Stella to my workplace. When she learned what had transpired, our mother raised her voice in return and demanded that I never speak to her in such a manner. I regretted that I had been disrespectful, but was unable to control my emotions at that moment. Feeling overwhelmed and wanting to avoid doing something regrettable, I ran out of the house. I didn't know where I was headed, but I knew I needed to be far away from them before my anger got the best of me. I stayed in a hotel for 3 days, crying and not hearing from my mother or sister. After a while, I decided to visit Uncle Greg. He was surprised to see me, especially on a weekday when I should have been at work. He asked about the issue, and I couldn't hold back my tears. It took some time for him to console me, and then I began telling him how I regretted not heeding his earlier warnings. What I didn't mention was that I'd been avoiding his house and calls ever since I helped Stella get the job, because I knew it would disappoint him, and I was right. Uncle Greg was initially upset with me for not listening, but his anger quickly turned to empathy as he understood the pressure of family expectations. He didn't want to discuss the matter further. He simply asked me to get into his car, and we drove back to our house. When Uncle Greg arrived at the house, he was furious. It was the first time either Stella or I had seen him like this. My mother, however, had grown up with her brother and wasn't surprised by his anger. She refused to take responsibility for my job loss and defended herself by stating that all she did was ask me to help my sister secure a job. She and Stella turned the tables on me, claiming that I hadn't guided Stella properly at work. Uncle Greg saw through their attempt to avoid blame and gave them a stern look before assuring me that everything would be okay. He promised to do everything in his power to help me find a new job. I thanked my uncle, who wasted no time in leaving the house. My mother, upon seeing her brother's departure, turned to me and called me a disgrace. She questioned why I had made such a big deal out of the situation and involved someone who had little or no business with it. I couldn't respond the way my emotions wanted me to, so I simply went into my room and closed the door. It has been 2 weeks since the incident, and both my sister and I are jobless. I am not sitting idly, waiting for my uncle to work his magic. I am actively searching for job opportunities and hope for a positive outcome soon. In an update, I can say it has been extremely challenging staying at home with my sister and mother. They have both united against me, making me feel like an outsider in my own family. I returned last week from yet another unsuccessful job hunt, feeling frustrated and exhausted. It appeared that even my uncle was struggling to secure a job for me, and I couldn't blame him. If I had been wiser, I wouldn't find myself in this current disaster. After submitting my qualifications to a firm that promised to get back to me, I decided to rest on the couch for a moment. My short nap was abruptly interrupted about 5 minutes later when my sister started screaming in excitement. She deliberately came to the living room, dramatizing her joy, as if she was deliberately looking for trouble, as she often did. Our mother hurried to her, and she informed her, loud enough for me to hear, that she had been invited for an interview at a law firm. Our mother was thrilled for her, but I tried to mind my own business. However, my sister couldn't resist taking a jab at me, insinuating that she was achieving for herself what sisters and uncles, who claimed to be family, could not do for her. It was a clear reference to me and Uncle Greg. I couldn't allow her to add to my frustration, so I gave a sarcastic laugh, mentioning that people celebrated interview invitations as if they had already landed the job. Not stopping there, I added a cutting remark about interviewers discovering they'd wasted their time with an empty-headed candidate. My sister was visibly affected, and she wanted to confront me, but our mother stepped in, clearly favoring her. This didn't surprise me. I hadn't expected anything different. Stella went for the interview and returned with a smile, informing our mother, right in front of me, that she was preferred over the other candidates and was offered the job on the spot. The pay wasn't as much as she had earned in my firm, but she was assured it would triple in 3 months. My sister and mother took delight in rubbing it in my face, making me wonder about the judgment of the employers who hired her. I also wondered about the quality of the other candidates if Stella was chosen over them. Nevertheless, I decided to wait and see how it would play out because I knew my sister's track record with jobs. In the second update, I had a serious altercation with my mother this morning, all because of my sister Stella. Since she got her job, my mother decided that no one else in the house, except me, should perform any chores, no matter how minor. I had tolerated it until this morning when my mother approached me and demanded that I do Stella's laundry. The demand was insulting, and I refused outright. I told my mother that I wouldn't touch my sister's clothing even if there was a gun to my head. My mother argued that Stella needed to focus on her new job, something she claimed I lacked. According to her, we should support her in any way we could. I asked my mother if Stella had ever done my laundry when I had my job. I finally told her that if Stella was too busy to do her laundry, she could do it herself or take it to one of the numerous dry cleaning services in the city. I retreated to my room, closing the door, feeling utterly humiliated. How could my mother demand that I do Stella's laundry? I decided to reach out to Uncle Greg and inform him about the humiliation I was enduring at the hands of my mother and sister. I was hoping for some good news, but amidst the torrent of insults I faced daily, my uncle revealed he was still trying to pull a few strings, though it might take time. He expressed his displeasure with the way my family was treating me and assured me he would talk some sense into my younger sister. One evening, as I was in my room, Stella returned from work and started arguing loudly over the phone. From her words, I gathered she was speaking to Uncle Greg. She rebuked him for meddling in our affairs and demanded he stay away from us. When my mother asked her about the call, Stella referred to Uncle Greg as that man who doesn't know his place. My mother seemed to approve of Stella's stance, believing I was foolish for involving an outsider in our family matters. In the third update, I made the decision to move in with Uncle Greg and his family after Stella's outburst. It became evident to him that I was enduring a lot at home. I informed my mother about my decision, but she dismissed it, claiming I had been trying to distance myself from her and Stella anyway. The only time I saw or heard from Stella was a month later when she showed up at Uncle Greg's place to invite both of us to an award event organized by her firm. According to Stella, the event aimed to recognize the efforts of key individuals, and she was one of the honorees. She wanted Uncle Greg and me to attend, perhaps to showcase her productivity. I confronted her, telling her she should be apologizing to Uncle Greg instead of inviting him to the party. Stella, undeterred, made condescending remarks, claiming she was offering him an opportunity to witness her glory. I refused to attend the event, expressing my disgust at the entire situation. Uncle Greg tried to convince me otherwise, but I couldn't comprehend why he wanted us to attend a party that seemed nothing more than a charade. In the final update, everything fell into place. I finally understood why Uncle Greg insisted we attend Stella's party. In the end, despite the difficult situation, Uncle Greg insisted that I present myself at my best for Stella's party. Reluctantly, I attended the event alongside my mother. As the ceremony unfolded, individuals were recognized for their contributions. When it was Stella's turn, she confidently stepped onto the podium, radiating confidence. Unexpectedly, she cut off her boss's statement and began speaking passionately. Her words were pointed directly at me, emphasizing her triumph over the hurdles she claimed I couldn't overcome. She labeled me a failure lacking the drive to succeed. Stella praised our mother, who basked in the attention. However, to my astonishment, Stella's boss invited Uncle Greg to the stage. Surprised, Stella watched as Uncle Greg debunked her claims. He revealed the truth about how I lost my job due to Stella's actions and our mother's selfishness. Uncle Greg disclosed that he orchestrated this scheme to expose Stella's lack of productivity. Stella was publicly fired on stage, drowning in shame. My mother hurriedly left, unable to bear the humiliation. Uncle Greg introduced me to influential people that day, assuring me that a job opportunity would emerge soon. I severed ties with my mother and sister, knowing they would likely come crawling back for assistance eventually. Looking back, I am grateful for Uncle Greg's support during this ordeal. If not for him, I might have faced this situation alone. Reflecting on this experience, I am overwhelmed by the twists of fate and the importance of having a strong support system. I welcome your thoughts on this story. What would you have done in my position? Consider this twist. What if I didn't have Uncle Greg to fall back on? Share your opinions in the comments below. My name is Mr. Redito, and I share drama stories every day, ranging from inheritance disputes to cheating tales. If you enjoy these narratives, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow, reminding you that kindness is always in style. Peace.
I'm Sarah, a 40-year-old mother of two, wedded to my rock, John, for almost 2 decades. Our life's been a thrilling yet challenging journey, and it's the companionship in these times that truly counts. However, things took a turn with the unexpected arrival of my younger brother Tom, a 32-year-old who's still figuring life out, often making impulsive decisions. It was a typical Sunday, with our family congregating at Mom's house, a place brimming with childhood nostalgia. As we were savoring Mom's delightful roast and her tales, Tom barged in, unexpectedly accompanied by a young, pregnant woman named Lisa, his fiancée. This sudden revelation, amidst a peaceful family lunch, caught everyone off guard. Lisa, youthful and visibly pregnant, was dressed more for a party than a family gathering. This news stunned everyone, especially my kids, Emily and Max, who were curious and bewildered by their new aunt-to-be and her sparkling attire. Tom's announcement of his engagement and impending fatherhood brought a tense silence to the room, only broken by John's attempt at congratulatory words. Tom declared their plan to stay at Mom's temporarily, which visibly worried her. It was like observing someone unwittingly edge closer to a precipice. That night, John and I discussed the situation. He expressed his concern about Tom's irresponsible behavior and the strain it was putting on my mother. The following days were chaotic, with Tom and Lisa overstepping boundaries, while Mom tirelessly catered to their needs, visibly worn down by their lack of gratitude. One evening, I found Mom in the kitchen, her fatigue evident. I urged her to stand up for herself, but her maternal instincts towards Tom and his unborn child made it impossible for her to turn them away. I felt an overwhelming urge to confront them, to expose their exploitation of Mom's kindness, but I restrained myself. In family dynamics, love often means overlooking the obvious faults, even when it's detrimental. This became our new reality: Tom and Lisa, the inconsiderate house guests, and the rest of us tiptoeing around to maintain harmony in a home that now seemed constricting. Our days were upended by Tom and Lisa's presence. Each morning was greeted with Lisa's loud grievances about her discomforts or cravings. She'd saunter into the kitchen, still in her nightwear, demanding breakfast without a hint of courtesy. "Sarah, whip up some pancakes, will you?" The baby's craving them, she'd order without a please. I'd clench my teeth, trying to maintain composure. "Sure, Lisa." Just after I prepare Emily and Max for school. Tom was equally unhelpful, idly lounging, his attention fixed on his laptop or video games, occasionally shouting for food without a glance our way. Mom attempted to mediate, reminding me they were young, but I couldn't overlook their blatant sense of entitlement. As Lissa's due date neared, the situation worsened. She left clutter everywhere, engaged in endless phone gossip, while dishes and laundry piled up. One day, I reached my breaking point. Finding her in the living room, feet propped on the coffee table, I confronted her. "Lisa, this isn't a hotel. You can't just expect everyone to clean up after you." Her response was a dismissive eye roll. "Chill, Sarah. I'm pregnant, remember?" Tom's defense was swift but infuriating. "Lay off her, Sarah. She's carrying my child." Mom intervened, pleading for peace, but the unfairness was glaring. She was exhausting herself for their sake, yet remained unheeded. They treated our home like a free-for-all, leaving messes and responsibilities for Mom, and even had the audacity to plan an extravagant wedding, expecting Mom to foot the bill. Their disregard for Mom's well-being became intolerable. Even after the birth of their son Alex, their behavior didn't change. One morning, I walked in to find Mom tackling a pile of dirty dishes, while Lisa idly watched TV and Tom was absorbed in his phone. I asked Mom why she was burdened with all the work, but the answer was all too familiar. The cycle of disregard and exploitation seemed endless, leaving me grappling with frustration and concern for my overburdened mother. I questioned Mom, trying to maintain composure, but her response only added to my frustration. "Lisa needs to rest, and Tom's busy," she said. Turning to Lisa, I pointed out her lack of contribution, but she retorted with the excuse of her recent childbirth. Tom, disengaged as ever, defended her, claiming ignorance of their hardships. I was incredulous at their audacity. Sitting idle and burdening Mom was their idea of being busy? Mom attempted to diffuse the tension, claiming she didn't mind the extra work, but my patience had worn thin. I argued that Mom was not their servant, but my words fell on deaf ears. Tom and Lisa continued their routine, frequently leaving the house, burdening Mom with their child, and flaunting their extravagant purchases. Discovering a receipt for an expensive dress, I confronted them about the financial burden they were placing on Mom. Tom's indifferent shrug and Lisa's smug attitude were infuriating. They saw nothing wrong in exploiting Mom's generosity. Alone with Mom, I pleaded with her to see the situation for what it was, exploitation. But her maternal instincts blinded her to their irresponsibility. "I can't abandon them, especially not Alex," she said. Despite my efforts to persuade her, she remained steadfast in her belief that they needed her help. Feeling helpless, I watched the family dynamic deteriorate. Tom and Lisa continued their parasitic behavior, while Mom, ever the selfless mother, couldn't recognize the extent of their exploitation. The situation reached a breaking point when Mom suddenly fell ill. One day, she was her usual self. The next, she was bedridden and weak. I stayed by her side, offering hopeful words, but inside, I felt a growing anger towards Tom and Lisa, who were conspicuously absent, likely squandering more of Mom's resources. I expressed my outrage, but Mom's response was tinged with sadness. "They have their own lives, Sarah," she said, her voice weary. Her condition worsened, and eventually, Mom passed away quietly in the night. I was there, but Tom and Lisa were absent, likely enjoying themselves, oblivious to our family's loss. The funeral was a blur, a mixture of grief and resentment towards my absent brother and his partner. Their absence during Mom's final moments and their continued disregard weighed heavily on me, underscoring the profound disconnection within our family. I recall the moment Tom and Lisa arrived at the funeral, their appearance more fitting for a celebration than a solemn occasion. Lisa's attire was notably inappropriate, drawing murmurs from the crowd. John offered me a comforting squeeze of the hand, trying to provide some support. Post-service, Tom urgently wanted to discuss Mom's will. His insistence, so soon after our loss, left me aghast. He claimed Mom had left the house to him, a statement that seemed incredibly presumptuous and insensitive given the circumstances. My protests about respecting Mom's memory fell on deaf ears. Tom was adamant about his entitlement. The following day, I visited Mom's house to gather her belongings, but I was met by Lissa's sneering face at the door. She coldly informed me that the house was now theirs, claiming Tom had inherited everything. Tom's appearance, confirming the claim with a smug grin, sparked a mixture of anger and disbelief in me. I felt alienated, standing at the threshold of my childhood home, now claimed by my callous brother and his wife. Determined to seek justice, I found myself nervously entering the notary's office. The whole ordeal, grappling with Mom's loss, and now this dispute with Tom, seemed like a nightmare. Mr. Jacobs, the notary and an old family friend, greeted me with a solemn expression. As I voiced my doubts about Tom's claim, Tom and Lisa arrived, exuding arrogance. Mr. Jacobs began reading the will, and my anxiety peaked. When he reached the part about Tom, he announced a bequest of only $5,000 to him, a revelation that visibly shocked Tom. Mr. Jacobs then continued, to my relief and surprise, declaring that Mom had left the family home and the remainder of her estate to me. This unexpected turn of events was a small solace in the midst of our family strife, offering a glimmer of hope amidst the grief and turmoil that had enveloped us since Mom's passing. The revelation in Mr. Jacobs' office left me feeling a mix of relief and vindication. Lisa, on the other hand, was incensed, incredulous at the idea that they weren't left the house. Mr. Jacobs informed us that Mom had made this last will only a month ago, due to her concerns about being pressured by certain family members. Tom's reaction was one of rage and denial, but there was a sense of justice in the air. Mom had seen through their exploitation. Tom accused me of turning Mom against him, while Lisa threatened legal action. Mr. Jacobs warned them about the possible legal repercussions if coercion was proven in any earlier will. Their confidence seemed to falter at this. As Tom and Lisa left the notary's office in a huff, I stayed behind to express my gratitude to Mr. Jacobs. I left feeling a whirlwind of emotions: sorrow for losing Mom, relief that her final wishes were honored, and anger at Tom and Lisa's audacity. Back at the house, Tom confronted me, infuriated by the disparity in our inheritance. I tried to explain that this was Mom's decision, likely influenced by their continuous financial demands. His frustration was palpable as he demanded to know why Mom would screw him over like this. Then I found Mom's letter, tucked away in a drawer. It explained everything. Mom had initially set aside an equal share for both of us, but as Tom and Lisa's demands increased, she began to deduct from his portion. By the time she wrote her last will, Tom had already received most of his share through these advances. Tom was shocked and in denial, unable to accept that his actions had led to this outcome. I was firm, my patience thinning, as I confronted him with the reality of the situation. He sat, overwhelmed by his own actions, pondering the gravity of what he had done. The weight of his choices and their impact on Mom's final decisions was a harsh reality he now had to face. As I set the letter down, a blend of pity and frustration washed over me. "You've only yourself to blame, Tom. This was your doing," I said, watching him leave the house, a shadow of the man he once was. There was a sense of justice in his departure, but it was tinged with sadness for a family now fractured by both grief and selfishness. The house, previously a battleground of family conflicts, now stood in a haunting silence. Tom and Lisa had left, severing all ties with me. It was a relief to be freed from their tumult, yet it also left me to grapple with the fallout of their actions. As I sat in the living room, lost in thought, my phone rang. It was Jenna, bringing news of Tom. He was job hunting in town, and Lisa seemed to be living a single life, with no sign of their son, Alex. Anger surged within me at their reckless disregard for their child. Jenna's voice broke through my fury, suggesting that maybe there was something I could do. Her words ignited a spark of determination in me. I had to fight for Alex. He deserved a better life. The next day, I met with a lawyer, Ms. Rivera, a straightforward and determined woman. I laid out my case, my resolve firm. I want to pursue custody of Alex. He's in a toxic environment, I told her. Ms. Rivera, sizing up the situation, agreed to help, though she warned it wouldn't be easy. The ensuing legal battle was arduous, with Tom and Lisa oscillating between cooperation and hostility. But I remained steadfast. John's support was unwavering, his arms a haven of comfort after each challenging day in court. "You're doing the right thing, Sarah. It's hard but necessary," he reassured me. The day I was granted temporary custody of Alex was filled with mixed emotions. He was a sweet, bewildered boy, but gradually he began to adapt to our family. Emily and Max quickly grew fond of him, and he brought a new joy into our home. Tom's reaction was one of anger and resignation. "You've taken everything, Sarah," he accused. I stood firm, knowing I was protecting Alex, a responsibility Tom had neglected. As Tom walked away, I realized our relationship might never recover, but this was about Alex's well-being, not our sibling rivalry. With Alex, life took on a new dimension. There were challenges, of course, but also moments of laughter and love. He was slowly becoming a part of our family, and I was resolute in making his presence permanent. Looking back, I knew despite the hardships and challenges, we were building a brighter future, one filled with hope and the love of a family reunited under new circumstances. Making the decision to bring Alex into our family was undeniably the right choice. It marked a new chapter for us, an opportunity to heal, grow, and foster a future brimming with love and stability. This was the legacy I yearned to create, a vivid departure from the selfishness and discord that once loomed over us. Our home, once a symbol of family strife, was now alive with laughter and the joyful sounds of children. Alex had seamlessly integrated into our lives, his presence a beacon of happiness. One evening, as I tucked him into bed, his innocent question about staying with us forever warmed my heart. "Yes, Alex, you're part of our family now," I assured him, and his contented smile was all the confirmation I needed. John, standing by the door, shared a look of pride and fulfillment. "He's really fitting in," he observed, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of achievement. We were providing Alex with the life he deserved. The next day brought the exhilarating news. The court had granted me full custody of Alex. Overwhelmed with emotion, I thanked Miss Rivera profusely. The family's reaction to the news was a beautiful sight. Emily and Max embraced Alex, and even John was visibly moved. "We're a complete family now," he said, voice laden with emotion. The journey had been tumultuous, but it strengthened us. While I occasionally thought of Tom and Lisa, hoping they would find their path, my priority was our children and our family. In the following months, Alex flourished, transforming from a timid child into one filled with confidence and joy. One day, while playing in the garden, he presented me with a dandelion, proudly announcing his wish for us to be together forever. Holding him close, I assured him that his wish had indeed come true. Looking around at my family, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. We had navigated through the storm and emerged more robust. Our future was a canvas of hope, love, and endless possibilities. This was our story, a testament to the resilience of family and the transformative power of love. It was a future bright with promise, and we were more than ready to embrace it wholeheartedly. Ten years had passed since my mother-in-law became confined to a wheelchair. Regular hospital checkups and physical therapy were routine for her. On this particular day, she was undergoing tests, and I found myself waiting in the hospital's waiting room before her therapy session. In the midst of my thoughts, a doctor suddenly pulled on my arm. A deep concern etched on his face. "I'm going to speak with her primary doctor about this," he announced. Gently releasing my arm, I observed that the doctor in front of me was a man, whereas my mother-in-law's primary doctor was a woman. Confused about the need for a doctor who wasn't her primary to discuss her case, I questioned the situation. The male doctor hastily grabbed my hands, realizing my suspicion. "There's something neither your mother-in-law nor her primary doctor should hear. That's why I only want to tell you," he explained. Intrigued, I took a step closer to him. "My name is Julie, a 37-year-old office worker. Recently, I've been working remotely for a small and medium-sized company. However, the doctor's revelation seemed unrelated to my mother-in-law's condition." He continued, "When I was a child, my mother left home, and I was raised by my father in a single-parent family. Despite my father's warnings about my mother being a spendthrift, I never felt lonely due to the love he showered on me. I eventually went to college and found a job, leading an independent life. 14 years ago, I married Mike. His mother warmly welcomed me into their family, treating me like her own daughter. However, tragedy struck when my mother-in-law was involved in a car accident, leaving her wheelchair-bound. Despite various caregivers, her condition deteriorated, and she expressed loneliness, prompting us to move back to care for her temporarily. As my husband and I visited her, she seemed relieved and began to smile. However, when we mentioned returning to work, her demeanor changed, and she didn't allow us to leave. My mother-in-law pleaded with desperation, her voice nearly hysterical. "No, please, both of you don't leave. Don't leave me alone." Attempting to calm her, I assured, "Mike really needs to return to his job, but I'll talk to my company and see if I can stay here a bit longer. I'll come back as often as I can. Just hang in there for me, Julie." With tearful eyes, she implored, "If you can stay, that would be great. Mike, you better come back, okay? I'll be waiting." After losing her husband, she had endured loneliness for a long time. Our sudden notification of departure likely triggered anxiety and confusion. Her weakened state over the past week heightened her fear of facing loneliness. After discussions with my company, I decided to switch to remote work and operate from home temporarily to care for my mother-in-law. However, her aversion to being alone persisted. Even when I worked from home, she clung to me relentlessly. I couldn't let her be seen by my coworkers, and no matter how close we might be, she'd always be waiting where she could see me. It felt like I was under constant surveillance, leading to a growing sense of resentment. Meanwhile, Mike would come home on weekends and take days off during the week to assist with her care. Despite ongoing physical therapy, her condition showed no improvement, preventing my return to the office. Our personal lives became dominated by her care, leaving no time for just the two of us. The 10th year of this lifestyle marked her 65th birthday, and with each passing year, her dependency on us grew. My husband, unable to bear the situation, reduced his visits year by year. Even if I stepped out for a few minutes, my mother-in-law would panic, insisting I take her with me. Calming her down took ages, and I couldn't go back to our own home. Yet, I couldn't abandon the woman who had welcomed me without judgment or prejudice from a single-parent household. Then, a pivotal moment arrived. During a routine checkup, I accompanied my mother-in-law to the hospital as always. Dr. Mia, a woman in her 30s, had been her trusted doctor for a decade. When my mother-in-law went into the examination room, a young male doctor named Ryan approached me. Startled, he said, "Excuse me, you're Sally's daughter, right?" Sally was my mother-in-law's first name. Ryan explained that he recently joined the hospital and worked in the same department as Dr. Mia. Intrigued, I replied, "Yes, I'm her daughter-in-law. What's going on?" Ryan apologized for the sudden approach and requested a moment to discuss something about my mother-in-law. Curious, I agreed, realizing her appointment probably wasn't over yet. Agreeing to Dr. Ryan's request, he led me to a small private consultation room not far from the examination area. Motioning for me to sit, he took a seat across a small desk, fixing his gaze directly into my eyes. "You're currently living with Sally to take care of her, right?" Dr. Ryan inquired. "Oh yes, that's correct," I replied. I explained that for the past decade, I had been working from my mother-in-law's home while tending to her needs. The increased dependency had left me with little personal time, causing my husband to avoid coming home. Listening intently, Dr. Ryan nodded. I found myself expressing all the frustrations that had built up. Apologizing for the venting, I remarked, "I'm sorry for going on like this." Dr. Ryan reassured, "It's completely all right. Anyway, 10 years, that's quite a commitment." His face turned thoughtful, and then he looked at me with a serious expression. However, before his words could reach me, a scream from my mother-in-law pierced the air. Both Dr. Ryan and I rushed to the examination room, only to witness an unthinkable scene that left me speechless. Dr. Ryan urged, "You should leave that house as soon as possible. Get away from your mother-in-law." Suppressing my anger, I nodded, and without heading to my mother-in-law, I went straight to the police. Despite skepticism, they promised to investigate. I hastily packed my belongings from the house, the disturbing image from the hospital replaying in my mind. An hour later, while still packing, I explained everything to my husband over a call. Numerous calls and messages from my mother-in-law flooded my phone, but I continued to ignore them. In the evening, my husband and the police arrived, and that's when I finally answered a call from my mother-in-law. Angrily, she demanded to know why I had left her behind. With a firm attitude, I informed her, "I realized I don't need to live with you anymore. I'm going back to the house where my husband is." Indignant, my mother-in-law ranted and raved. With a sigh, I responded, "Why don't you just walk back home from the hospital? After all, your legs are fine, so you don't need a wheelchair or care, right?" As I continued explaining, my mother-in-law let out a short scream, conveying her extreme upset. I could vividly imagine her emotional turmoil as I disclosed the revelations I had discovered. I shared with her the unsettling information that Dr. Ryan had conveyed and the first-hand experience of witnessing an unexpected turn of events. Dr. Ryan had revealed that recent tests showed no physical issues with the muscles or nerves in her body. Instead, he speculated that her belief in her inability to walk might be psychological. The power of such beliefs could be formidable, and Dr. Ryan considered both physical and psychological care for her legs. In his efforts to include me as a family member in the care plan, he had called me over. However, it turned out that my presence wasn't necessary. During our conversation, a scream echoed from the examination room, my mother-in-law's. Dr. Ryan and I hurriedly went to check the room, finding her gesturing as if swatting away an insect. To our surprise, it was a false alarm. She had mistaken dust for a bug. In a surreal moment, she picked up the motionless dust and walked to the trash can, revealing that she could walk without the need for a wheelchair or cane, moving with astonishing ease. Dr. Ryan pushed me to the corner of the hallway, and we observed silently as my mother-in-law, seemingly unaware of our presence, calmly returned to her wheelchair. Dr. Mia entered the room, exchanged an envelope with my mother-in-law, and, acting nonchalantly, pushed her wheelchair toward the physical therapy facility. Stunned by the unfolding events, I stood frozen until Dr. Ryan gently shook me out of my daze. He'd advised me to leave my mother-in-law's house immediately, and I hurriedly packed, desperate to escape this surreal revelation. Throughout my narrative, my mother-in-law remained silent. Finally, with an audible sigh over the phone, she began to speak, perhaps realizing she couldn't evade the truth any longer. Acknowledging the car accident that initially left her wheelchair-bound, she admitted that thanks to treatments, she could walk with the aid of a cane about 5 years after the incident. Listening in disbelief over the speaker, my husband and I were stunned. What puzzled us most was the purpose of the 12 years we had spent caring for her. She expressed her fear that once we discovered she could walk, we would leave her side. Tearfully, she admitted, "Julie, Mike, I couldn't bear that thought. I feared losing you both, and that's why I kept up the pretense. I truly love you like my own daughter." My mother-in-law had often expressed her loneliness after Mike moved out and my husband passed away. Despite her repeated pleas, Our hearts remained unmoved. While we understood her feelings, we believed the way she went about it was wrong. Apologizing, we explained, "We can't be by your side any longer. Sorry, Mom, Mike, but the way you went about it was wrong." I continued, expressing my own sentiments. "I've been taking care of you for the past 10 years while working. My colleagues have experienced promotions, marriages, and childbirth. Because of your care, I couldn't have a child of my own. I had almost given up on having kids, but now I feel like the past 10 years are in vain. Why did you deceive us to the point of having us care for you? We would have visited you during our time off. Why did it have to be this way?" Though I didn't mean to blame her, tears welled up as the words poured out. With my husband supporting me, I conveyed that I no longer intended to care for her. We decided to leave her house that day and cut off all contact. Despite her protests and hysteria, we hung up, contacting the police, who assured us they would begin an investigation. 2 months later, while at a hospital with my husband, Dr. Mia, my mother-in-law's supposed doctor, rushed over to us. We remembered her with fuller cheeks, but now she looked gaunt and fatigued. Curious about her presence, we reluctantly listened as she approached with a desperate look. Dr. Mia revealed that she knew all along that my mother-in-law's leg was healed. She had accepted money to provide a false disability diagnosis. The money was in the envelope she received from my mother-in-law that day. Due to a recent complaint by Dr. Ryan, the hospital discovered her forgery and fired her immediately. Furthermore, she faced potential arrest for fabricating medical records, and her medical license was likely to be revoked. Incredibly, Dr. Mia insisted that the money wasn't an appreciation gift from my mother-in-law, but hush money from my husband and me. She alleged that we plotted to scam disability pension by making my mother-in-law disabled. However, there was no evidence to support these claims. It was shocking to realize that Dr. Mia, facing legal trouble, had shifted the blame onto us. In disbelief, I responded, "What are you talking about? We haven't done anything like that." Dr. Mia persisted, claiming it was the truth. "I'm going to tell the police everything," Dr. Mia shouted, her eyes red with rage, making us turn pale. While her claims lacked evidence, proving our innocence would be challenging, and the mere thought terrified us. My husband and I were on the verge of tears when a woman approached us, standing between Dr. Mia and us, shielding us from her wrath. Aren't you the head doctor here? I urgently need to talk to you," she said. Upon seeing the woman, Dr. Mia turned deathly pale, quickly putting on a forced smile and approaching her with flattery. The woman glaring at Dr. Mia was the head doctor of the hospital, and she was Yvonne, my mother. Yes, my mother, from whom I was separated as a child due to her divorce, was now a doctor and held a prominent position in a major university hospital. She was one of the people advocating for revoking Dr. Mia's medical license upon learning about her misdeeds. "Oh, you're related. In that case, could you please just hear me out?" Dr. Mia begged, trying to invoke my mother's sympathy. However, my mother shook her head, stating, "Don't mess with me. You and Sally have been deceiving the hospital and the authorities for 10 years, keeping my daughters confined at home. Sally kept them at home because she was afraid to be alone. You, on the other hand, funded your debts from your nightlife with Sally's disability benefits. You frauds need to face appropriate punishment and make amends." Dr. Mia's plea was abruptly dismissed, and realizing there was nothing she could do, she slumped to the ground in despair. Whispers and stares from those around us focused on her, and we couldn't help but watch with indescribable feelings. Suddenly, a strong pull came from behind, startling me. I turned around to find, astonishingly, my mother-in-law standing firmly beside my father. My father angrily shouted at my mother, demanding, "What have you done to Julie?" I was taken aback, wondering why my father was there and why with my mother-in-law. When I heard that Sally was looking for Julie, I wanted to help. "You moved to a place without telling me, and I thought I would meet you if I followed Dr. Mia," my father explained. The reason I hadn't told my father our whereabouts wasn't just because of the family connection between my mother-in-law and him. Since my mother-in-law's car accident, I had asked my father to look after her when I was out for work. During those times, they became close and started dating secretly behind our backs. I had found out about this last year, suspecting their relationship when I saw them talking closely at my in-laws' house. "Give Julie back. I won't let you take her away," my father yelled at my mother, an intensity I'd never seen before. Brushing off his grip, I shouted, "Stop it. I know all the stories you told me about Mom are lies." My father's face went pale at my revelation. Since the divorce, he had been feeding me lies about my mother to ensure I didn't want to meet her. The stories about her treating him like a slave or leaving him for a younger man were all false. My mother, an accomplished doctor, always had a busy schedule, and my father knew this when they married. However, after I started daycare, his attitude shifted drastically. Blaming her for our lack of family vacations, he decided to divorce her, claiming she wasn't a good mother. On my 4th birthday, my father suddenly took me and left home. In reality, it was him who left, not my mother. Following the divorce settlement, even though my mother had a decent income, she couldn't guarantee time for raising me. My father was nominated to live with me. However, my mother had been sending a substantial amount in child support every month. I didn't know this until I met my mother. Even after becoming a single parent, my father ensured I didn't want to see my mother by portraying her in a negative light with false stories. It seemed that my mother wanted to see me, but most of the time, she was overseas for training or research. She kept sending me letters from overseas that my father kept refusing, hiding the letters. There were times when it seemed they might meet, but something always came up. Either my mother got an emergency call at the hospital, or my father would come up with an excuse to cancel at the last minute. I had been told since I was young that my mother couldn't be reached, or that no one knew where she was. It turned out that was a lie. The reason my father could afford to travel once every 2 months and pay for my high school and college tuition was thanks to the child support money from my mother. Our comfortable life was all thanks to her. So the story of my father working late nights was also a sham to make it seem like he was struggling with parenting. He'd work a regular 9-to-5 job, then spend nights somewhere, coming home only in the early morning. When my father yelled, "Where's your proof?" my mother calmly showed him a mobile bank app, saying, "This is how much I've transferred to you over the years for Julie, and your company unusually has strict policies against second jobs, so it was impossible. I can confirm with them if you'd like." My father crumbled, and my mother-in-law tried to comfort him. Seeing my father like this made me realize that I had been lied to my entire life. While the truth was shocking, I felt more anger than anything else. I said coldly, "Thanks for everything, Dad, but it's time to say goodbye." Saying that, my father clung to me, and my mother-in-law said, "Julie, your dad did everything he thought was best for you." No, he did it for himself. He lied about struggling as a single parent, using the money from my mom. And you lied to my husband and me, trying to bind us to your home. Both of you are a perfect match for your lies. Please stay away from us. With no excuses left, my father and my mother-in-law were speechless. Ignoring their stunned faces, we left the hospital with my mother. Later, Dr. Mia was arrested and lost her medical license. She had forged medical documents multiple times and was sentenced to imprisonment. Additionally, the hospital she worked for is suing her for defamation. My mother-in-law had bribed a doctor for a fake diagnosis, leading to her having to pay back all the pension money she received with interest. She's also facing fraud charges, as informed by the police. Mike says he's cut ties with her, so he's not bothered about her future. I'm trying not to care either. As for me, I realized I had been somewhat dependent on my mother-in-law. Feeling betrayed sent me into a mental spiral, so I've been seeing a therapist at the hospital where my mother works. Regarding my reunion with my mother, when I was getting a referral at my previous hospital, the doctor's name I was referred to was the same as my mother's. To my surprise, it was actually her. My mother was skeptical when she saw a patient named me, but during the consultation, she realized it was me. Our reunion can only be described as miraculous. I can't be treated by my mother due to hospital rules, but she supports me from behind the scenes. I've been back to my job at the office while still attending therapy. When visiting Dr. Ryan, who informed me of the truth about my mother-in-law, I heard that he and my husband were old high school buddies. We now often hang out with Ryan visiting our place, and everything feels like old times. It may be hard for me to forget how I was tied up by my mother-in-law and my father. But my husband, my mother, and Dr. Ryan always encourage me to take things easy and do what I want. Thanks to that, I'm planning trips with my friends or going to cafes by myself.